Chapter 618. Nangong flipped out, one side palace hall. When Su Luo entered, the empress had just sat upright in the seat of honor, watching her with a tranquil gaze. Su Luo did not pay her respects. The corner of her mouth merely rose slightly, not showing any weakness as she welcomed the empress's gaze. The empress held the fragrant tea, carelessly tasting it and giving Su Luo the cold shoulder. But unlike her appearance, in her mind, she was not this inattentive. On the contrary, with regards to this Su Luo, she was somewhat suspicious. The empress couldn't remember the last time she had seen Su Luo, but in her impression, the previously Su Luo was stupid, timid, and couldn't be brought out in public. However, the Su Luo right now calmly stood there. Because of the backlighting, her entire figure seemed blurred and hazy. So unperturbed, unhurried and calm, that temperament and atmosphere was more noble and steady than a princess raised by the royal family. When the empress was sizing up Su Luo was also inwardly pondering. This empress appeared gentle and harmless on the surface, but that pair of eyes flashed with a sharp coldness from time to time, was seen through by Su Luo. Su Luo understood very clearly that the empress did not like her. The empress calling her out alone was definitely to deliberately make things difficult for her. But why would she be worried? In any case, she also didn't like the empress. If she was to be polite, then fine, but if she deliberately made it difficult for her, then Su Luo was not a pushover that could easily be pinched as the hostess wished. The empress saw Su Luo staying calm, and she couldn't help but feel somewhat smothered in her heart, becoming increasingly unhappy with Su Luo. Sit. Under the gazing eyes that were opened wide to stare narrowly at her, in the end, it was still the empress who spoke first to break the silence. Thank the empress for granting a seat. Su Luo, neither servile nor obsequious, made her salutations, and then she sat down as if it was her right. Afterwards, naturally, it was a face-to-face with the empress, silent staring contest. The empress's long, shapely eyebrows wrinkled slightly. This loathsome girl that didn't know what was good for her actually thought she was someone of importance. She actually went so far as to learn Nangong Liuyun's mannerism. Although the empress was annoyed in her heart, but she had to request something from her, so she couldn't embarrass the person too much. One could only see her lightly glance at Su Luo. I heard that the crown prince owes you a lot of green-colored crystal stones? Yes. Su Luo replied concisely. You have a lot of guts, daring to challenge the crown prince. Even if your father came, he also doesn't have this much guts. The corner of the empress's mouth held onto a faint sneer. It's heaven's law and only proper to pay back a debt. Su Luo lazily and directly repeated the words Nangong Luyun said before. The empress's hand that was concealed by the phoenix robes clenched tightly, a displeased expression passing by her face. She had already hinted so clearly. Was this loathsome girl truly so foolish or just acting stupid? Could it be that in her mind, she didn't know even the basic difference between a ruler and his ministers? The empress took a deep breath, and then slowly spoke a sentence. If this empress was to ask you to forgive this debt, what do you think? A sneer flashed through Su Luo's heart. The empress was also really interesting. She could not deal with Nangong Luyun, but chose to attack her instead. Could it be that she, Su Luo, seemed like such a pushover? Acting like a pushover, Su Luo raised her eyes, staring at the empress in an astonished manner, because she was too surprised, so her voice was quite loud. Empress mother-in-law, you want me to renounce these 1,500 green-colored crystal stones for nothing? Such a loud tone that also contained Su Luo's strong spirit force, therefore, her voice was sent out especially far. The few males in the imperial study could hear it very clearly. Su Luo absolutely did this on purpose. Nangong Luyun very satisfiedly sat on the round, yellow rosewood chair, the corner of his mouth rising unrestrainedly into a cynical smile. His dark eyes were pitch black as the night as they gazed at the crown prince with a ghost of a smile, while lifting a sharp sword-like eyebrow. The crown prince's face flashed with a blush of shame. Awkwardly, he directly turned his face away. Chapter 619. Nangong flipped out too. Emperor Jing looked at these two siblings, helplessly sighed, then fell back into his seat. Momentarily, the inside of the imperial study became quiet. Right now, inside the side chamber, The Empress was glaring rigidly at Su Luo, wishing she could bore a hole through her face by glaring. She never expected that this loathsome girl would actually shout it out loud. Wasn't this the same as letting everybody know that she, as the righteous and grand Empress, was relying on force to bully others? The Empress inhaled deeply and glared coldly at Su Luo. Su Luo, you have a lot of guts. Su Luo opened wide her pair of perplexed and innocent eyes. What did I do wrong? The Empress was already angry. After seeing Su Luo's pretend innocent expression, she became even more furious. I order you to shut up, the Empress angrily said in a low voice. Oh. Su Luo very cleverly and seemingly obediently shut up, and once more her eyes lowered. It seems that you are unwilling? The Empress calmed down. She was also not a fool, and immediately understood after a little thought. This official's daughter does not understand the Empress's meaning. Su Luo responded ambiguously. The Empress suddenly smiled coldly as she stared at Su Luo strangely. However, Su Luo remained calm and composed. Serenely, she let the Empress look. In the end, she even grinned at the Empress. The Empress felt her chest become stifled. These kinds of psychological tactics she, who always had the upper hand due to her high position, was ever victorious. However, in front of this loathsome girl, it had lost its effectiveness. The Empress coldly laughed. Su Luo, you are very self-confident. Let this Empress guess where your self-confidence truly came from. I'd like to hear the details. Su Luo was using words to lure the Empress who kept evading the main point. Su Luo's heart was rather dissatisfied. Before seeing the Empress's performance, Su Luo had thought that her life experiences made her really good. It must be Nangong Luyun then? You thought that if you curry favor with him, then everything would be unhindered, right? The Empress leisurely and comfortably played around with the white jade ring on her thumb, the corner of her mouth curving up into a smirk. Su Luo remained silent, unspeaking. She had always known that relying on a mountain, it would collapse. Relying on people, they would run away. The most reliable thing was still herself. Therefore, no matter how good Nangong Luyun treated her, she would never let go of pursuing to the pinnacle of martial arts. The Empress saw her remaining silent, and believed that she had tacitly agreed. Immediately, her heart was somewhat excited, but her face remained cold as she snorted. No matter how good Nangong Luyun treats you in the end, you will be no more than a concubine who could not be brought out. Was the Empress trying to drive a wedge between them? Su Luo thought this was very funny. However, her expression cooperated with what the Empress said, looking bewildered. The Empress was very satisfied with Su Luo's response and cast an enigmatic glance at her. Have you ever heard of Jade Lakesley family? The Jade Lakes Fairy? This name was on the verge of popping out. Su Luo slightly frowned, looking at the Empress. As expected, the Empress coldly laughed. Li Yaoyao, this name you may not know, but you should already know about the Jade Lakes Fairy, right? Yes, I know. Su Luo nodded. Not only did she know, but they had also secretly exchanged blows a few times. The Empress carelessly watched her and coldly smiled. Then, this matter of Li Yaoyao and Nangong Liuyun's having an engagement agreement. Are you aware of this? Engagement agreement? Su Luo's eyes squinted, her heart becoming sour. Su Luo's beautiful eyes stared at the Empress, her voice smooth and unperturbed. Empress, why are you trying to sow dissension? Whether Nangong Luyun is engaged or not, how could he not know himself? Unexpectedly, the Empress started to coldly laugh. A major event such as a marriage is always decided by the parents. Why would he need to know? Even if he knew, you think that he would have told you? Just when Su Luo frowned, the Empress continued. Of course, this matter has not yet been publicized. There is still time to prevent it. Su Luo looked at the Empress. Chapter 620, Nangong flipped out 3. The Empress's mouth hooked into a having prevailed smile. If you can tear up that loan receipt, then this Empress promises to use all her strength to help you destroy that engagement. You don't believe me? The Empress saw Su Luo did not speak, and she gave a cold humph. I believe you, Su Luo said faintly. The Empress naturally did not want Nangong Luyun to marry someone from the Jade Lakesley family. Because if that were to happen, with the support of the Jade Lakesley family, Then what could the crown prince bring to the fight when he was already at a disadvantage from before? Therefore, even if Su Luo didn't make the promise, the empress would use every means to destroy this marriage. Now the empress saying this to her was merely to bully her. Figuring she didn't know the critical point within, Su Luo was silent. She was silent not because of the empress's words, rather, she was observing a moment of silence for Emperor Jing. If he really dared to draw up the engagement contract with the Jade Lake's Fairy on Nangong Liuyun's behalf without asking him, what kind of stuff would Nangong Liyun do? She was convinced that when the time came, the pressure on Emperor Jing would be huge. The empress saw that Su Luo was silent, and believed this matter was in the bag. The smiling expression at the corner of her mouth became increasingly more self-satisfied. Bring it over. The empress extended a white, jade-like hand towards Su Luo. Bring what? Su Luo pretended, with her entire face looking confused. Su Luo, don't pretend to be naive. You need this empress's assistance, otherwise His Highness Prince Jin will definitely marry Li Yao Yao. The empress bluntly said everything, leaving it out in the open. Therefore, bring me that loan receipt. All of a sudden Su Luo smiled. Her smile was splendid like a blooming flower. Empress, our mother, in your eyes, am I just that stupid? You, what did you say? The empress stared at that splendid smile on Su Luo's face in astonishment. These words spoken by Su Luo made the empress's eyes momentarily contract. Empress, our mother, if the Jade Lake's Fairy were to marry Nangong Liyun, the Jade Lake Palace would use their full strength to support Nangong Liyun. When that time comes, then the Crown Prince wouldn't have a threat of opportunity. Once the Crown Prince loses all his influences and power, then presumably Empress, our mother's days, would also not be so good. Su Luo smilingly looked at the Empress. With every word she spoke, the Empress's complexion would become paler. Therefore, the person that wants the most to block Nangong Liuyun's marriage to the Jade Lake's Fairy is you, the Empress. Why should I be worried? Su Luo spread out her hands, smiling innocently. The fury on the Empress's face grew without restraint. She never expected that this loathsome girl was not incited by her into disharmony, and also wasn't poisoned by her words. In the end, she actually reversed the words and checkmated her. The Empress's chest moved up and down violently. You are a loathsome girl that doesn't know what is good for you. Nangong Liyun is willing to protect you, but can he protect Su Manor? You are forcing the entire Su Manor into hell. Su Luo again shouted out loud in astonishment. Empress, our mother, even if you loathe me, you also shouldn't move against Su Manor. This voice was simply earth-shattering, resonating to the skies. Not only the people nearby in the imperial study could hear it clearly. Even those maids and court eunuchs in the far distance could hear every word. The Empress was so infuriated that her face flushed red. When she was married, she was already high above as the first wife. After becoming the Empress, she again was one person above everyone. Never had there been anyone who dared to contradict her like this. The Empress, utterly discomfited, grabbed the official blue and white porcelain teacup by her hand, swung her arms and directly tossed it at Su Luo. When that teacup was a hand's width away from Su Luo, Su Luo very rudely sat her butt on the ground, evading the attack of the teacup. Su Luo had already made preparation for when the Empress would act out violently, therefore, her reaction was very fast. At the same time, Nangong Liuyun's figure had already appeared. One could only see his sleeves raised slightly, a burst of wind unfurling. Bang! That teacup did not end up on the ground, rather, it was spun around by Nangong Liuyun's wide and long sleeves. It directly shot towards the Empress's forehead. Chapter 621. Nangong flipped out for Nangong Liyun, you dare! The Crown Prince angrily shouted, but it was already too late to block the teacup's path. Following right behind Nangong Liyun was Emperor Jing and the Crown Prince. Emperor Jing's expression right now was very complicated. He never expected that this unfilial son had become so daring to this degree. That was the Empress this nation's mother, the ceremonial mother of all under the heavens, the Empress in a public place with numerous people and under their gazes, he would actually directly. This was the great crime of matricide. Not to mention Emperor Jing's incomparable shock, just speaking of that teacup alone. that was being treated like a ball, slapped back and forth. One could only see the teacup on a straight-line path, shooting towards the Empress with a speed that was too fast to block or dodge. The Empress's heart was greatly alarmed. She glanced towards Su Luo. Immediately, a bright idea flashed by. With a bang sound, she sat heavily on the ground. Even though the two people made the exact same move, but the difference with the inside trick was still too great. Su Luo was already a martial artist at the peak of the 4th rank. Her body had reached an astonishing degree of toughness and flexibility. How could an insignificant fake fall be a problem? But it was not the same for the Empress. Even though the Empress's talent before was pretty good, but these years she was busy with the inner fights in the imperial palace and living like a princess. Where would she find the time to cultivate? In addition, the teacup smashing towards her had came from the hand of an infuriated Prince Jean. One could only hear the Empress, with a difficult movement, falling from a high position to the ground, barely avoiding that approaching teacup with a murderous aura. But the strong wind of the teacup swept past her head. Ouch! The Empress, who sat heavily down on the ground, gave a loud cry of pain. The teacup swept by the Empress's coiled hair, and immediately, the Empress's beautifully coiffured hair was messed up. The phoenix and gold hairpins made crashing sounds as they fell. The Empress with disheveled hair cut a very sorry figure. The Crown Prince hurriedly rushed over and sank to his knees to help the Empress, anxiously saying, "Mother Empress, are you okay? Is anything wrong?" The Empress, in a panicked state, had her eyes open bewilderedly and indeterminedly. She held her chest with lingering fear, too frightening, simply too scary. The Crown Prince, seeing that the Empress was unscathed, only then did he turn around. He pointed at Nangong Luyan with a malevolent expression and angrily roared, "You dare to murder Mother Empress? Nangong Luyan, don't think that because your martial arts are so strong you are extraordinary. If you murdered Mother Empress, you would meet the wrath of the heavens." Father Emperor, Nangong Luyan intended to kill Mother Empress. I hope Father Emperor will give her justice. The Crown Prince's angry outburst aroused Emperor Jing from his shock. Now the expression Emperor Jing looked at Nangong Luyan with was very complicated. Only until just a moment ago, when he moved against the Empress without the slightest hesitation, had he suddenly come to realize that this second child was no longer that child who back then had sought his protection. The Nangong Luyan right now was not someone he could control. Father Emperor! Father Emperor! The Crown Prince cried out loudly towards Emperor Jing. Emperor Jing waved his hands toward him, but his gaze unblinkingly stared at Nangong Luyan. "We, the Emperor, will give you a chance to explain." "Explain." Nangong Luyan smiled. His smile was cruel, noble and untamed, carrying a touch of disdain. "What does Father Emperor want this official to explain? Just now you tried to kill the Empress, still dare to deny it." The Emperor, panting with rage, bellowed at him. This was him, the Emperor, protecting him, giving him a chance to explain. He actually returned it to question him. Nangong Luyan was really too brazen, too used to doing whatever he pleased. That was the Empress. Could it be that he didn't even know the basic filial obedience? The more Emperor Jing thought, the more furious he became. That Empress wants to murder this king's little princess as she wishes. What kind of crime should that be? The corner of Nangong Luyan's mouth lifted into a smiling expression, but his eyes were ice cold, lacking any temperature. Deep and eerie, strange and extremely cold. No one dared to look straight at that gaze. Chapter 622. Nangong flipped out 5. Other things Emperor Jing did not pay attention to. He only paid attention to Nangong Luyan's way of addressing her. "Little princess?" His eyes opened wide in shock. When did Nangong Luyan have an extra little princess, and him, as the emperor, actually didn't know? "Yes." Nangong Luyan said deadly earnestly. One could only see him pull on Su Luo. Both hands were like iron cuffs, imprisoning her, not giving her any opportunity to struggle free. At this moment, with daggers drawn, Su Luo felt that it was better that she didn't say anything at all. In fact, in her heart, she had already tacitly agreed on the reality that Nangong Luyan would be her future mate. It was only that she wouldn't tell him this. As for Emperor Jing, his finger was shaking as he pointed at Su Luo. glaring at Nangong Luyan in complete disbelief, raising his voice to say, "You want to marry her and make her your Princess Jean? You have an objection?" Nangong Luyan lifted up an eyebrow and carelessly asked, "Have an objection?" Certainly he objected. He had a huge complaint. Emperor Jing's heart was not satisfied, pointing at Su Luo as he angrily said to Nangong Luyan, "What kind of vision do you have? How could this girl be worthy of you? This is simply a lapse of judgment on your part, even though you are wise. We, the emperor, will never agree to this." Su Luo, who was being looked down upon by Emperor Jing, watched Emperor Jing unperturbed. Nangong Luyan tightly held onto Su Luo's hand and pointed at the empress, his eyes like sharp swords shooting towards Emperor Jing. "What kind of vision do you yourself have?" Emperor Jing finally was angered to the degree where his complexion was ashen, both eyes wide open and staring fixedly at Nangong Luyan. He was so infuriated that he simply could not say a word. Nangong Luyan's expression was as impassive as before, with one hand on Su Luo's shoulder. "I see Luo as very good in my opinion. It is still uncertain as to who really is not worthy of whom. His Luo girl, naturally, was unique and unrivaled in the world. He had searched the entire world before finding her. Yet others actually dared to criticize her as not worthy? Wasn't this courting death?" Emperor Jing was infuriated until he was gasping for breath, gulping deep breaths of air. "We, the emperor, do not agree," Emperor Jing loudly yelled, and he even coordinated with stamping his feet. "I did not ask for your opinion." Nangong Luyan didn't even bother to toss this his way. In other words, whether Emperor Jing agreed or not, as far as Nangong Luyan was concerned, it was not at all important. Emperor Jing was used to being the emperor, and was always waited upon and flattered by others. When had he been so scorned by anyone? You this unfilial son. See if we, the emperor, won't beat you to death." Emperor Jing was infuriated to the point of waving his hand to directly slap towards Nangong Luyan's face. However, Emperor Jing's hand was fixed in midair, because his hand was effortless gripped to a stop by Su Luo. A trace of a cold smile flashed through Su Luo's eyes in passing. She threw his hands off. Unexpectedly, Emperor Jing retreated a step from being thrown off. Emperor Jing was infuriated until he nearly went insane. He, as the majestic and grand emperor of Eastern Ling Empire, his existence should be the most respected. Being bullied by second child could be forgiven. But now, an insignificant, young loathsome girl would also treat him like this? Emperor Jing was practically in disbelief, because in his mind and from his knowledge, this simply could not happen. Why did these two people not see and treat him as the emperor? Su Luo clapped her hands. Her complexion was restrained as she seriously watched Emperor Jing. "Nangong Luyan is mine. I absolutely will not allow anyone to hurt him." Luo. Nangong Luyan lowered his eyes with a complex expression as he watched Su Luo. Just a moment ago, in the split second when she blocked Father Emperor, Nangong Luyan's heart warmed without a reason. That kind of warmth, which he hadn't felt for a long time, was somewhat unfamiliar, and made him somewhat at a loss. But that feeling felt unprecedentedly good. Su Luo held his hand tightly with a serious expression, looking at him. "Before, it was always you protecting me. In fact, I also want to protect you." Chapter 623. Nangong flipped out 6. Nangong Luoyun's figure jolted slightly to a stop. Lowering his eyes gently and cautiously, he gazed at Su Luo with a nervous expression. His eyes held disbelieving rays of light. For a long time, he had cast aside his arrogance to foolishly wrap himself around her in order to thoroughly tie her up. He even lowered himself to act as her servant, repeatedly investing in their relationship. Now finally, had he obtained a response? Faced with Nangong Luoyun's unbelieving gaze, Su Luo gave a smile that was as beautiful as blooming flowers in the summer. She pushed his arm, as if to shake him awake from a dream. "I am yours, you are naturally mine. Could it be that you don't agree?" Nangong Luoyun, as if beginning to wake up from a dream, was extremely happily surprised, and embraced Su Luo. He was so excited that he nodded wildly. "Couldn't agree with you more. The Nangong Luoyun right now Where was the insufferably arrogant His Highness Prince Jean that dared to challenge the powerful emperor? The him now was like young child who hasn't grown any hair with excitement that was almost impossible to restrain. Emperor Jing saw this young pair of lovebirds flirting in front of his eyes, and a raging inferno ignited in his eyes. In such a public place with lots of people, in front of we the emperor, you guys are still hugging and embracing. How scandalous. After that, he directly aimed his criticism at Su Luo. Su Zian seems okay. How could he have raised this kind of loathsome girl like you who doesn't know any shame? You are a girl, be aware and have some sense of honor, okay? Su Luo happily and contentedly stayed in Nangong Liuyun's embrace. She poked her head out and coldly smiled towards Emperor Jing. Who did you say was shameless? Nangong Liuyun held on to Su Luo, coldly smiling at Emperor Jing, who was nearly angered to death. Whatever Luo girl says is what I say. Your father the emperor says I am shameless. Oh. Su Luo rubbed against Nangong Liuyun's chest. Nangong Liuyun dropped a tender kiss on her forehead. The two people made a public display of affection in front of Emperor Jing. Seeing this pair of young lovebirds that echoed each other full of mutual understanding, Emperor Jing only felt that his forehead was about to burst. A fit of riled-up blood was boiling over. If prior to today, Nangong Liuyun was determined to marry this loathsome girl, although he might not be happy, he might also barely accept it, but now Emperor Jing knew he couldn't persuade Nangong Liuyun, so he could only retreat a step and coldly snort at him. If you really like this loathsome girl, it is not completely out of the question. Taking her as a concubine will be fine, but you absolutely cannot marry her as the princess and main wife. Out of the question. Nangong Liuyun straightforwardly refused. Even the position of princess, he already felt it wasn't good enough for Su Luo. If Su Luo wanted, Nangong Liuyun would even help her become an empress. Why is it out of the question? Which royal aristocrat doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? Why would it be out of the question for you? Are you still listening to this emperor's words? Who knew that Nangong Liuyun wouldn't buy into it at all? He boldly and righteously spat out a sentence that nearly made Emperor Jing fall down from anger. One could only see Nangong Liuyun's jet-black, ink-like eyes unblinkingly gaze at Su Luo. His tone was overbearing and intolerant of others' opinion. This king will only take 1 wife and no concubines. A smiling expression appeared in Su Luo's eyes. This kind of Nangong Liuyun, how could she refuse him? It was as if he was made to her exact measurements. Infatuated, tyrannical, single-minded, and the most important thing was that his philosophy was identical to hers. In these ancient times, like what Emperor Jing said, 3 wives and 4 concubines were normal. If Nangong Liuyun had this inclination, no matter how good he was to her, she still wouldn't have bothered with him. But now he clearly, openly and definitely declared his single-minded intent. This made Su Luo put down her last thread of reservation. She smilingly looked at Nangong Liuyun, such a handsome, overbearing, infatuated and single-minded male. Really was that the more she looked, the more she felt that she had hit the jackpot. Emperor Jing coldly tossed out a sentence. Since it is like this, then you guys are absolutely not allowed to marry. Chapter 624, Nangong flipped out 7. Why? Su Luo glared at him, not accepting. Because Nangong Liuyun is already engaged. Therefore he absolutely will not marry you. In the future, you should not try to wrap yourself around second child. Otherwise we the emperor will not be polite to you. Emperor Jing's tone was indescribably firm. Nangong Liuyun was already engaged? This sentence was similar to a bomb thrown into the sea, immediately causing a burst of tempestuous waves. The veins on Nangong Liuyun's forehead jumped out, his complexion hazy like an approaching storm. Coldly staring at Emperor Jing, he closed in on the emperor step by step, stressing each word, and said, "Say it again." Being stared at by that bloodthirsty gaze of his, an indescribable fear appeared in Emperor Jing's heart. His heart suddenly had an unknown type of fright, therefore, he subconsciously retreated, then retreated again. If you have the ability, say it again. Nangong Liuyun with one move grabbed him by the collar. Emperor Jing completely didn't expect that following after the empress, this second child would dare to even move against him. He, the stately, majestic emperor, at this moment his collar was actually being grabbed by someone. Also, because of exactly this, that touch of fear in his heart dispersed and was replaced by fury. One could only see the emperor smiled coldly. Yesterday, Father Emperor had already agreed to a marriage for you. Therefore, you don't have to trouble yourself over it. Su Luo frowned slightly. Liao Yao. Emperor Jing's indignant gaze swept towards Su Luo and coldly smiled. You actually guessed it. Rescind the marriage. Nangong Luyan lifted Emperor Jing to the front of a table, took out a brush already dipped in ink, and handed it over to him. Immediately write the document to rescind the marriage. Nangong Liuyun's strength was great, and Emperor Jing's hands were pinched until they became extremely painful by him. Exactly because of this, the fury in his heart flourished even more. Has marriage already been decided? There is no backing out. Emperor Jing looked at him with a cold smile. If you want the Nangong family to withdraw from the royal lineage, then break off this promise of marriage. When the time comes, then you will be the family's sinner. In the end, when you go to the underworld, see how you will face the ancestors that established the Nangong family. Emperor Jing was taking this huge country with 10,000 miles of rivers and mountains to press down on Nangong Liuyun's body, forcing him with no other choice but to compromise. However, very clearly, he had underestimated this son's stubbornness. 10,000 miles of rivers and mountains? Haha, you care, but I certainly don't care about it. Nangong Luyan, with a fierce appearance, laughed evilly as he looked at Emperor Jing, who was rigidly fixed to the spot from hearing this short sentence. You this unfilial son. Emperor Jing was so furious that he shouted out loud. Nangong Luyan calmly and composedly pointed at the crown prince. If I really care about the position of emperor, you think this stupid and incompetent crown prince would be able to live till now? Emperor Jing was immediately stumped for words. His body swayed, and was unable to control himself as he recoiled by 2 steps. He originally believed he could threaten Nangong Luyan with this trump card, but unexpectedly, it doesn't have the slightest use on him, because he absolutely did not care. And at this moment, the crown prince who was mentioned almost jumped up. Nangong Luyan, who are you calling stupid and incompetent? Who are you calling that? The crown prince practically demanded, having been infuriated. Having grown up till now, there still wasn't anyone who dared to speak this in his presence. But now Nangong Luyan showed no quarter as he cursed him out as stupid and incompetent. If you aren't stupid, is it possible for you to owe such a huge debt that you couldn't pay even in this lifetime? Su Luo in annoyance rolled her eyes at him. A noble person has self-knowledge, Your Highness the Crown Prince. It's still better for you to take a breather. Nangong will not fight over the position of Crown Prince with you, because he simply feels that it's not worth doing. Su Luo, in the dark, added another twisted with a knife-like words. You, what does a loathsome girl like you understand? The Crown Prince wanted to curse her, but found himself without the words, because everything this girl said was true, he couldn't refute it. What don't I understand? However, can Your Highness the Crown Prince pay back the green-colored crystal stones you still owe me? Chapter 625. Nangong flipped out 8. These days the money I have on hand is a little tight. Su Luo smilingly looked at him. Su Luo knew that both Nangong Luyan and Emperor Jing had stubborn dispositions, and that neither was willing to admit defeat. If they continued to fight, then both sides would suffer, and this would allow the Crown Prince to pick up some cheap benefits. As a result, she jested in order to draw this business back to the main point. Nangong Luyan tossed Emperor Jing aside and walked to Su Luo's side. He had both hands looped around his arms as he cast careless, sidelong glances at the Crown Prince. Now you can return the debt, right? I couldn't afford to return it. The Crown Prince wanted to cry but had no tears. His eyes cast glances towards the Empress and Emperor Jing. Deducting the costs for those damaged properties, he still had to return more than 2,000 green-colored crystal stones. Even if you killed him, he still could not afford to pay it back. Don't you have a treasure storage pavilion? You can use other treasures with spirit powers to repay the debt. Su Luo's eyes glittered and shined. She really wanted to bring the little divine dragon along to pick and choose. Nangong Luyan nodded his head. This also sounds good. At this moment, Emperor Jing's heart was extremely angry with Nangong Luoyun. Seeing him and that loathsome girl unite again to bully his crown prince, temporarily, his reasoning withdrew, and all of a sudden, a sentence came out. His treasure storage pavilion can be regarded as fart. If you have the ability, then go to the royal treasure storage pavilion. When the crown prince heard these words, he simply burst with joy, and he immediately ran over to hug Emperor Jing's thigh. Father Emperor, your son, this official, thanks you for your saving grace. Even if your son, this official, has to work like an ox and a horse for his entire life, he will repay your generosity. Emperor Jing became somewhat stupefied. In fact, what he meant to express was not to tell Nangong Luoyun's party to go to the royal treasure storage pavilion. Rather, he was disdainful that the crown prince's treasure storage pavilion was too small. More than 2,000 green-colored crystal stones. This was not a small number. Even Emperor Jing himself, momentarily could not take out so many. Emperor Jing wanted to explain, but discovered that if he was to explain, would he still want an emperor's dignity or not? Emperor Jing sent a very fierce glare at the crown prince, his inner rage immediately rushing up. First, Nangong Luoyun was disobedient to him and did not treat him as the emperor. Now the crown prince also cheated him, this father, scheming against him by every means. Emperor Jing, panting with rage, glared at the crown prince. However, he could not say a single word of refusal. This kind of feeling was especially suffocating and depressing. When Su Luo heard what was said, her eyes momentarily shined. Indeed, it was like the emperor had said. Compared to the royal treasure storage pavilion, the crown prince's treasure storage pavilion simply was not even worth a look. If she were to choose, of course she would choose the royal treasure storage pavilion. As a result, Su Luo pretended to be unperturbed and said, "Is the emperor going to help the crown prince repay the debt? This I can actually consider." Nangong Luoyun had paid close attention to Su Luo's expression all along. How could he not understand her thoughts? As a result, Nangong Luoyun, who was always in disagreement with the crown prince, suddenly acted in collusion with him. He pondered, holding his chin, and looked towards Emperor Jing with a frown. Is Father Emperor willing to repay this debt for the crown prince? Not waiting for Emperor Jing to reply, Nangong Luoyun indifferently nodded his head. Giving Father Emperor some face, it can only be so. Could not continuously watch the nation's crown prince being hounded to death in front of him. After all, he is still this king's elder brother. Emperor Jing's expression changed slightly. He wanted to say something, but discovered that Nangong Luoyun had already held Su Luo's hand and walked in the direction of the royal treasure storage pavilion. Emperor Jing suddenly returned to his senses. He shouted towards Nangong Luoyun's back. "We the emperor order you to stand still." However, Nangong Luoyun did not even turn his head, and continued to walk away. "Li Yaoyao's matter, what do you plan to do?" Emperor Jing's heart was uncertain. He had already agreed to this marriage. What else can be done? Whoever agreed to this marriage should marry her. Nangong Luoyun bluntly and decisively tossed out this sentence, afterwards pulling Su Luo along and gradually proceeded further away. However, this sentence infuriated Emperor Jing to the point of near collapse. Could this brat even speak with human words or not? His childhood sweetheart, he wanted we the emperor to marry. Chapter 626. Nangong flipped out 9. Although Nangong Luoyun was determined not to recognize his arranged marriage with Li Yaoyao and also insisted on wanting to marry Su Luo instead. But at this moment, Emperor Jing became as stubborn as Nangong Luoyun, this time demanding that he marry Li Yaoyao. This was all a part of an emperor's dignity. Not to mention how the emperor's complexion turned ashen from fury. Let's return to Su Luo and Nangong Luoyun's viewpoint. The royal treasure storage pavilion was located in the deepest part of the imperial palace, being in the forbidden area. Normally, besides the guarding elder, nobody else was allowed near it. Seeing those 4 huge, golden glistening words, the corner of Su Luo's mouth perked up into a smile. The treasures with spirit force were collected by the entire Nangong clan for many years, and placed in the treasure storage pavilion, since the establishment of this family. Naturally, the treasures were extremely abundant, simply giving a person great expectations. In her hands, the greatest shortage was in treasures with strong spirit power. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. After she entered the treasure storage pavilion, no matter what, she must obtain a few benefits. Suddenly, from the side, a person's figure floated out. This was an elderly man whose eyebrows and hair were all white. Looking at his age, he was about 70 to 80 years old. Despite his white hair, his complexion was rosy, appearing extremely hale and hearty in old age. The number of people Su Luo knew wasn't many, however. This elder, she unfortunately did recognize. Nan Gongyu. On that day when she had a duel with Su Qing, he was one of the 3 judges, and also the only person who gave her troubles. At that time, Su Luo saw through to the greedy desire he had towards the little divine dragon. Thus, her impression of him was not so good. Even now, seeing him guarding the door, her long, shapely eyebrows knitted slightly, Nan Gongyu, with one look, was able to recognize Su Luo. On that day, the matter of the little divine dragon showing off its divine might left a deep impression on him. However, because the little divine dragon was given by His Highness Prince Jin, whom he could not afford to offend, so he had no other option but to pull back. At this moment, his attention was all placed on Su Luo's body. His eyes were slightly squinted, with a dangerous aura flashing through its depth. Unexpectedly, she didn't bring that little thing over here? Lead the way ahead. Nangong Luyan sent a displeased glare at him, coldly throwing out this sentence. Nangong Yu's expression did not change. His eyes remained tranquil, without a single ripple. He nodded his head, and moved forward to lead the way. The him right now seemed very well behaved. While walking, Nangong Luyan said to Su Luo, "This kind of opportunity is hard to come by, do not waste it. After entering, we will be sent to different rooms, therefore, I won't be able to help you." Nangong Luyan paused for a while, then continued. "Inside this treasure storage pavilion, there are many treasures acquired by my ancestors during their travels around the world. Whether you can get a huge windfall will all depend on your foresight and luck. Do you think my luck could possibly be bad?" Su Luo smilingly looked at him. Nangong Luyan paused, then with a smile he rubbed her head. "It seems like I was worried over nothing." Inside the room with the gateway, there was a bright, white circular diagram. The treasure storage pavilion did not have doors nor windows. Every time someone entered or left, they must pass through this mysterious teleportation array. It was rumored that this teleportation array was created by the founding ancestor of the Nangong family back in the day. This ancestor's story was extremely rich and colorful, like all legendary tales. If pen and paper was used to describe it, even millions of words would not be enough. The moment she passed through this teleportation array, Su Luo knew that Nangong ancestor was definitely a space mage, and was also the supreme expert kind. Following the wake of 2 brilliant white flashes, Nangong Luyan and Su Luo disappeared on the spot. Nangong Yu watched the 2 silhouettes that disappeared, his eyes flashing with a trace of dissatisfaction. He was one of the people that protected and guarded the surroundings, and never had the qualifications to enter the pavilion. Seeing that in front of him was a mountain of treasure inside, but he could not enter, this kind of feeling was too stiflingly depressing. It was similar to having his heart gnawed and bitten by a poisonous insect, making him feel extremely unwell. Just now, Emperor Jing sent a single word in secret. Seeing the white light remaining after Su Luo disappeared, a cold smile flashed through Nangong Yu's eyes. Chapter 627, Treasure Storage Pavilion, 1. Standing in the circle of light, Su Luo only felt her mind being dazed. When she opened her eyes again, the surrounding scenery had already changed. Su Luo opened her eyes and felt that the light in front of her eyes were exceptionally glaring. She couldn't help but to use her hands to cover her eyes. Only after a good while was she able to adapt to the light here. Su Luo raised her head and swept her eyes in all 4 directions. Right now, appearing in front of her was a huge cave. Inside the cave, there were rows of yellow rosewood shelves arranged neatly and in an orderly manner. On the shelves, the treasures with spirit force were arranged by categories. The surroundings were all bathed in rays of light, like the stars in the sky, twinkling and dazzling. This cave gave Su Luo a feeling somewhat resembling a modern supermarket. It gave her a familiar feeling. Su Luo carefully examined everything and noticed that the area of this cave wasn't really big. It was probably about several hundred square meters in dimension. However, she thought about it slightly and understood. Nangong Luyan and her were not in the same room. This showed that there were at least more than 2 rooms inside the Royal Treasure Storage Pavilion. This is the Nangong clan's treasure storage pavilion? Isn't it rather too rich? Su Luo's eyes looked all around. Every single spirit treasure was wrapped up by a layer of dim light, appearing very captivating. Just when Su Luo was lamenting, the little divine dragon inside her space poked his head out. Awoo, awoo. The little divine dragon, seeing the spirit treasures around, suddenly opened his little mouth. She only heard the sound of something breaking, and when Su Luo opened her eyes again to look, the light wrapped around the spirit treasures, without exception, had all disappeared. Su Luo, startled, opened her eyes wide and poked at the little divine dragon's head. What did you do? The little divine dragon jumped up 2 or 3 times in Su Luo's embrace. Expressing his wishes by gently rubbing his plump little belly, he mumbled pitifully to Su Luo, "Hungry? Just a while ago, those clouds of spiritual energy were all absorbed by you. Yet you are still hungry?" Su Luo woke up to reality from being dazzled, grabbing the little divine dragon and scowling directly at him. Those spiritual energy lingering around the surrounding spirit treasures were the essence and best feature of this place. After losing it, the formidable power it had would weaken greatly. However, the little divine dragon, in one breath, had absorbed it all. If this was seen by Nangong family's ancestor, very likely he would catch the little divine dragon and make him into stew. Unexpectedly, the little divine dragon himself didn't seem to be aware of this being his fault. He grabbed Su Luo's hands and placed it on his soft belly, deflated his small mouth pitifully, and anxiously and impatiently looked at Su Luo. Still hungry? That soft and yielding tiny appearance was extremely adorable, making others pity him while also being affectionate towards him. It made people wish that they could deliver all the good things under heaven to him. However, all of these have been swallowed by you. You tell me what's to be done? Su Luo spread out both hands, expressing her helplessness. Originally, among these spirit treasures were a few items that she fancied, but now, since their effectiveness had been weakened greatly, she naturally would not take them. However, this was also part of the little divine dragon's luck. Only he could absorb these spiritual energy. Even she could not absorb them. The little divine dragon crooked his head and thought for a while. Afterwards, he extended his little fingers and pointed up ahead. Su Luo's face had an awkward expression, because the place in front that the little divine dragon pointed to was a hard rock wall. She didn't have the ability to pass through walls. Who would have thought that this time the little divine dragon would be especially stubborn, determinately and persistently saying, "Treasure, treasure, many, many treasures." With regards to the little divine dragon's ability to find treasure, Su Luo absolutely believed in it. Then fine, let's try to find the exit. Su Luo placed the little divine dragon on the floor. She carefully studied that glossy as jade wall by herself. Outside the treasure storage pavilion, inside a tiny room, Nangong Yu sat cross-legged. In front of him was a fist-sized crystal ball. At this moment, a small black dot appeared on the wall. Chapter 629, Treasure Storage Pavilion 3, and his inherited memory had told him, just place your hand on the wall and you could enter. How could it not have worked? Where was the problem? The little divine dragon patted his own head. No matter how much he thought, he could not understand. Su Luo's forehead nodded slightly, with a heavy expression. She sank into deep thought. She started to ponder from problem of opening a path from the beginning, bit by bit, recalling everything inside the treasure storage pavilion, trying to find the trick within. In the beginning, she first stood within the transparent diagram, having been delivered inside this room. The transparent diagram, teleportation array. Suddenly, a light flashed through Su Luo's brain, and her eyes shone abruptly. How could she have forgotten? At that time, the elder ancestor that established the Nangong family, he was one of the rare space mage on this continent. This wall created by that legendary space mage was definitely not easily found by a person. Perhaps, inside, there was the power of space. Su Luo finally felt that her own mind was opened wide. Anyway, no matter whether it will work or not, she'll know if she give it a try. Su Luo thought about it, then used large strides to walk to the front of the wall, and pressed her palm against that bright and clean wall. Then she applied her space powers. In the beginning, the wall was still as undisturbed as before. However, with the passing of the time, with more and more spirit force, the space powers became more and more full. Finally, all of a sudden, a buzzing sound resounded. Success. A happy expression flashed through Su Luo's eyes. Suddenly, a bright white light appeared around Su Luo's body. Just at this critical moment, the little divine dragon, with one leap, jumped up. His two little paws grabbed hold of Su Luo's thigh. Just when he grabbed hold of Su Luo, her figure disappeared in a flash from within this room. Su Luo felt a burst of dizziness and her vision blurred. When she opened her eyes again, the surrounding scene had changed greatly once again. Was this the place behind the wall? Su Luo originally thought she would be met with danger. She had even taken a fighting position. But in front of eyes, was completely empty with nothing here. She dropped her fighting position, and started to size up this place that she had been mistakenly transferred to and accidentally entered. This was a cave. Compared to the room outside, this place was much bigger. The surroundings were completely empty without a single shelf, thus, it was even less likely to see the spirit treasures on the shelves. In fact, Su Luo didn't know. This inner room was the place where the most precious treasures were stored that had been collected over the years from the empire. Emperor Jing would never have imagined that Su Luo would be able to enter the inner room of the treasure storage pavilion. Because this place was very much a secret, even Emperor Jing himself had only heard of the existence of this treasure storage room through legends. However, he could not enter because he didn't have space powers. Just when Su Luo was staring blankly, from up in front came the sound of the little divine dragon barking a woo. Su Luo looked and immediately laughed. Didn't know what mechanism the little divine dragon had set off, but now in midair, little cloud-like spheres had appeared. Moreover, the little cloud-like spheres were wrapped around spirit treasures that people would yearn for even in their dreams. The brilliant, dazzling rays of light on the spirit treasures now seemed extremely gorgeous. At this moment, the little divine dragon had pounced up to a little cloud-like sphere, and was barking loudly at the thing inside. Su Luo diverted power to her foot, borrowing its strength to jump up. After seeing clearly the stuff inside, even she exclaimed in astonishment. It was a dagger. Through the transparent cloud-like sphere, Su Luo could clearly see the two words carved onto the handle of the dagger. Yanhua, 1. Yanhua? This name, Su Luo felt it was somewhat familiar, but couldn't recall where she might have seen it before. But seeing the little divine dragon's impatient appearance, Su Luo just knew. This dagger was certainly a treasure. Su Luo's original dagger was destroyed when she tried to kill Li Outyin on the barren island with deserted mountains. Nowadays, she was only using an ordinary dagger. 1. Yanhua. The Chinese words for beautiful and splendid/flowery. Chapter 630, Treasure Storage Pavilion 4. She was just thinking of finding some time to look for a good dagger at an auction house. Now that she was thinking about it, she just so happened to encounter it. This was truly like about to doze off and someone would deliver a pillow. It couldn't be better. Su Luo was very happy, and reached out with her hand to take it. However, she was stunned to discover that she was unable to take it. These small, cloud-like spheres seemed like the simplest kind of covering to protect against the rain, but were firmly protecting the treasures, making it that even if other people coveted them, there was no way for them to take it away. Seeing the spirit treasure that she liked in front of her eyes, but no matter what, she couldn't even take it out. This really felt extremely unpleasant. Su Luo's eyes twinkled like the stars. Since she had already entered the secret inner room of the treasure storage pavilion, then she shouldn't just enter this mountain of treasures and return empty-handed. Su Luo thought. At that time, the Nangong family's ancestor who was a space mage, this elder used space element to make a door look like a wall. In that case, these cloud-like spheres, could they be related to space element? Su Luo's eyes twinkled like starlight. Regardless of what was said, it couldn't be wrong to try. Su Luo gathered her space system power, stuck her palms on the cloud-like spheres, and continuously pouring the force of space into it. However, there was no response. Adding more, there was still no response. By the time Su Luo's brows were beaded with sweat, there still was no reaction from these cloud-like spheres. Su Luo was helpless. Apparently, space element was not the key to unravel this cage. Then what was the key to breaking through this? Su Luo powerlessly pounded on these transparent yet extremely hard, cloud-like spheres up high, while gloomily sighing. Soon after, she tried to take the entire cloud-like spheres with the treasures inside into her space, but what made Su Luo depressed was, these cloud-like spheres, imperceptibly seemed to have a kind of strange force that fixed them in place. She simply could not take them into her space. About 10 of these cloud-like spheres were suspended in mid-air. If she could not even take this one, then there was no point in thinking about the rest. At the moment, Su Luo's only hope was placed on the little divine dragon's body. The little divine dragon's perplexed small face faced these small cloud-like spheres as he looked at them left and right, up and down. He tried to scratch them with his claws, but discovered that his claws were useless. He tried to puff out flames, water, and all kinds of elements, but as before, it was all useless. What's to be done? The divine dragon grabbed his ear and scratched his cheek, looking exceedingly depressed. Having thought hard and still couldn't think of a way, the little divine dragon became angry. Facing these cloud-like spheres, he simply bit down. Su Luo saw this and hurriedly lifted the little divine dragon back up. Careful, don't break your teeth, this is very hard. Su Luo's words still weren't finished yet. Afterwards, a scene that stunned Su Luo occurred. The little divine dragon bit down a mouthful. Then, these small cloud-like spheres were like a white steamed bun, suddenly lacking a corner. This way is also possible. Su Luo was simply speechless. What kind of thing was the little divine dragon's teeth? This kind of hard stuff, and he could actually bite it? Su Luo might simply just worship the little divine dragon's teeth. The little divine dragon smiled toward Su Luo as if taking credit for an achievement. Afterwards, he just buried his head in these small, cloud-like spheres, unceasingly biting down and swallowing. The little dragon's bite was not fast at all, but the small mouth was, nevertheless, continuously moving. Very quickly, one could see that cloud-like sphere was missing a corner. In addition, this corner, in the wake of the little divine dragon's nibbling and biting, continued to become bigger. Su Luo saw that the little divine dragon directly swallowed what he bit out, and she couldn't help but be somewhat worried. Can you eat this? Supplement, great supplement. The little divine dragon excitedly nodded, his two little claws holding the small, cloud-like spheres and once again immersed in pigging out. The corner of Su Luo's mouth pursed slightly. Who could have anticipated that these cloud-like spheres protecting the spirit treasures, with regards to the little divine dragon, was a great supplement? Su Luo confiscated a tiny piece and tested it on herself to see if it was a supplement for her. Chapter 631, Treasure Storage Pavilion 5, but she had just put it into her mouth, and then immediately spit it out. Poo poo poo. Su Luo hurriedly spit it out. Fortunately, she didn't use a lot of strength to bite it, otherwise, all of her teeth would have fallen off. Su Luo saw the little divine dragon's speed in gnawing at it was not that fast, and as a result, she let him work on it peacefully. She herself was flying in midair, choosing spirit treasures she needed. Su Luo was very clear that she was unable to carry away all of the spirit treasures. Treasure storage room, no matter who it was, after entering for one day, you must come out. Otherwise, the teleportation array would automatically shut down. With the little divine dragon's nibbling speed, within a day, the most she could carry out were 3 items of spirit treasures. The dagger was 1 item, the remaining 2 items she must select very carefully. Therefore, within this completely empty cave, besides the little divine dragon's rat-like chewing on sugarcane snapping sounds, was Su Luo's figure that flew in the sky. The precious treasures here, every one of them was awfully attractive to people. Advanced-grade medicinal pill, secret martial arts instruction manuals, high-grade weapons, every item made Su Luo's heart beat with eagerness. After some consideration, Su Luo settled upon the wood element martial instruction manual as the second item. Among her 3 elements, she had a lot of harvest in the purple fish place from last time for her fire system and her space system. The only exception was the wood system, because there was a lack of secret books of knowledge. As a result, up until now, she hadn't cultivated the wood element. Therefore, this time, Su Luo, without the slightest hesitation, was set on the advanced wood element secret instruction manual as her second treasure item. As for the third item, Spirit Pinball. Seeing this Spirit Pinball, all kinds of sad feelings rushed up into Su Luo's heart. On that day, because of the little divine dragon's treasure hunting ability, therefore she was able to dig out a Spirit Pinball. However, when she used it, she actually smashed Li Outyin into a 7th rank expert. At that time, it really destroyed her until her intestines were green. Now seeing this still dark Spirit Pinball, lying there still and unmoving, in a white-colored little cloud-like sphere, Su Luo's heart had a slight but bad feeling. However, no matter what, this Spirit Pinball was a weapon that could be used to save her life. Moreover, this Spirit Pinball seemed to be stronger by another level compared to the one before. After considering it back and forth, Su Luo finally still decided to pick this Spirit Pinball. Waiting until the little divine dragon had finished gnawing on these 3 cloud-like spheres, his belly had already inflated to become even more plump. Now he was very drowsy, like a roly-poly toy he couldn't stand up steadily. Su Luo, seeing this, merely collected him into her space to avoid disturbing him. Last time, the little divine dragon's cultivation made huge advancement after the event. Didn't know if this time, he would have the same good luck. Su Luo's heart was hopeful and expectant. Holding the 3 spirit treasures, Su Luo easily withdrew from this secret inner room made from space powers. One could see now, in a dark cave, Su Luo once again appear in the first room she started off in. Whereas outside, before, when Nangongyu saw Su Luo's figure disappear from the crystal ball, his mouth had hooked into a maliciously cold laugh. Trying to enter Nangong clan's real and most valuable treasure pavilion. The result of being greedy was only the path to death. Just when Nangongyu was twirling his white beard in an extremely good mood, all of a sudden, that little black dot once again appeared on the crystal ball. That smiling expression on Nangongyu's face immediately became rigid. His eyes were opened wide, staring fixedly at that continuously moving little black dot, with fists clenched firmly. How could it be like this? Clearly, that loathsome girl had triggered the mechanism on the wall. If she had used brute force to open it, she absolutely would be bitten by the recoil from elder ancestors' martial force. But how was it that nothing happened to her? No matter how much Nangongyu thought, he could not understand. He thought about it until his head was in pain. Now Su Luo somewhat hesitantly stood inside the room in the treasure storage pavilion. Seeing the treasures in her hand, her expression was somewhat indecisive. The value of these 3 spirit treasures were more than sufficient to make up for the 1,500 pieces of green-colored crystal stones. Chapter 632, Treasure Storage Pavilion, 6. But she clearly had the space element, should she? Su Luo's gaze swept around the surroundings once. Suddenly, the corner of Su Luo's mouth raised into a smile. No, she would take the things out openly like this. Even if others were to know, then what? After all, it was from Emperor Jing to compensate her on behalf of the Crown Prince. She had no qualms about taking it. If Emperor Jing was infuriated to death, then let him die of anger. It's just perfect if he died from being enraged. Su Luo directly took those 3 things and went out. Su Luo didn't know, precisely because of this notion of hers, which allowed her ensuing days to have fewer twists and turns. Because Nangongyu knew Su Luo had entered the inside room of the pavilion. In addition, the news of the inside room of the pavilion having lost 3 treasures would very quickly spread out. Therefore, if Su Luo had placed the 3 spirit treasures in her space, then it would very easily raise Nangongyu's suspicions. Once he spread this news out, Su Luo would not have any peaceful days afterwards. Su Luo was totally unaware that she had unintentionally escaped a calamity. At this moment, she was holding the spirit treasures and standing in the teleportation array. A burst of black rays of light flashed through her eyes, and Su Luo was already standing at the large doorway. Facing her was the extremely unsightly face of Nan Gongyu. Nan Gongyu's eyes flickered with chilliness, rigidly staring at Su Luo with an ice-cold expression, probingly sizing her up. Being stared at with this kind of expression, Su Luo had a feeling of being watched closely by a poisonous snake. The corner of Su Luo's mouth rose into an indifferent smile. Could Elder Nangong have an objection to me? What Nan Gongyu couldn't understand at all was how she escaped that calamity. He stared blankly, his indifferent voice carrying a certain tone. You entered the most valuable treasure pavilion. Su Luo's figure slightly paused. Nan Gongyu actually knew? Could it be that there was also some kind of monitoring device or such inside? Then, when the little divine dragon had appeared out of thin air, wouldn't it be? A sliver of icy coldness flashed through Su Luo's heart, but her face was calm and collected, unperturbed like water, as she said. Elder Nangong even knew of this? How did you enter? These words that Nan Gongyu said made Su Luo feel relieved. Since Nan Gongyu hadn't seen how she entered the most valuable treasure pavilion, then he naturally wouldn't know about the matter of her body containing the space element. Su Luo indifferently showed a shallow smile. Why is Elder Nangong's complexion so unsightly? Could it be that I shouldn't have entered that place? Su Luo didn't answer his question, rather, she had changed the topic. Nan Gongyu's complexion was bad. His sinister gaze stared fixedly at the 3 spirit treasures Su Luo was holding. Don't tell me that I really shouldn't have entered? Could it be that the treasures I brought out from there does not count? Su Luo used retreat to advance while smiling happily and asked. If she truly couldn't take it away, Nan Gongyu would have immediately snatched away her spirit treasures. Wherefore would he waste so much nonsense talk with her? Su Luo obviously knew where she stood. This was called having gotten some benefit and still flaunting it. Nan Gongyu's heart was full of anger. The fists at his side were firmly clenched. Although he didn't know how this loathsome girl could come out safely after entering. However, that mechanism on the wall was secretly lowered by him to the lowest level, so as to get this loathsome girl to dig her own grave. But at present, not only hadn't it killed this loathsome girl, instead, he even let her have a rather plentiful harvest. This was called couldn't steal a chicken but instead even handed out some rice. Seeing that Nan Gongyu's complexion was between greenish-black and red, a sense of danger flashed through Su Luo's heart. The surroundings had bands of extremely strong spirit aura, clearly concealing countless experts from the Nangong family. These people does not have even a little bit of friendship to her. If Nan Gongyu moved against her at this moment, then... Just when Nan Gongyu's finger was about to move slightly, Su Luo suddenly smiled, loudly asking, "Where is Nangong Luyan? How come he still hasn't come out yet?" Chapter 633, Treasure Storage Pavilion 7. Su Luo deliberately raised her voice. Nangong Luyan, these words, immediately stopped Nan Gongyu's slight movement. Just at this moment, the doorway swayed a little as a person's figure slowly appeared. Nangong Liuyun's mouth had a smile, but his eyes that watched Nan Gongyu narrowed dangerously. Nan Gongyu retreated a step, bowed and made his salute. "Your Highness Prince Jin." Nangong Luyan gave a cold snort, didn't even acknowledge him, and took large strides to walk towards Su Luo. "How was it? Are you satisfied with your harvest?" Nangong Liuyun's incomparably handsome face carried a touch of tender feelings. His elegant, bony finger hooked her nose. "At least, unlikely to be inferior to yours." Su Luo pointed to what she was holding in a flaunting manner. "However, don't know if these will exceed the 1,500 green-colored crystal stones range." Now, Nan Gongyu's viper-like gaze stared fixedly at Su Luo. However, Su Luo merely handed the 3 spirit treasures over to him, and smilingly said, "Elder Nangong, please give an estimate." Nan Gongyu nodded his head and carefully examined these 3 spirit treasures, his lowered eyes flashing with greedy intent. Not mentioning the other things, just that spirit pinball alone was enough to make Nan Gongyu green with envy. Su Luo might not know, but he was very clear. This was the condensed spirit force of a 9th-ranked expert before his death. The entire Nangong clan, merely had 2 such 9th-ranked spirit pinballs that were passed down for many years. But now this loathsome girl actually took away one so openly, if His Majesty was to know. Nangong, you couldn't even imagine it, how infuriated Emperor Jin would become after finding out. Nangong, you pondered over the spirit pinball with an indifferent voice, saying, "This spirit pinball, at the very least, will require 1,000 green-colored crystal stones. Considering His Highness Prince Jin's face, then I'll just record it as 1,000 crystal stones." Nangong Liuyun's expression condensed slightly, but he didn't say anything. 9th-ranked spirit pinball, its value was hard to assess, there was always a price but no market for it. Therefore, Nangong Yu's appraisal of 1,000 green-colored crystal stones also could not be said to be too excessive. Su Luo's eyebrows nodded slightly, seeing that Nangong Luyun didn't speak, she also endured it. Then the remaining 2 items? Su Luo unhappily asked. Nangong Yu picked up that book of secret martial knowledge for wood element, a trace of chilliness flashing through his expression. Inherently, he was also a wood element mage. This secret book was the most attractive to him. But now, in contrast, this loathsome girl had picked it up so cheaply, his heart was unwilling. Nangong Yu indifferently said, "This book of secret martial laws for the wood element is at least 800 green-colored crystals. Only with such a high prince would his heart feel slightly balanced." Su Luo frowned. Originally, she only had a limit of 1,500 pieces. Just now, the spirit pinball was quoted as 1,000 pieces. This wood element secret martial laws was another 800 pieces. This was already above the limits. Was Nangong Yu toying with her? A touch of annoyance flashed through Su Luo's eyes. Had she known earlier, she would have placed them in her space and carried it away with her. Seeing Su Luo frown, Nangong Liuyun's expression was still as indifferent as before, and pointed to the last item, the dagger. "This dagger, this king will quote a price in your place. Let's say 700 green-colored crystal stones." Nangong Liuyun's tone was overbearing, to the extent of not allowing any refusal. Nangong Yu originally did not agree, but faced with that pair of deep, ice-cold eyes, his heart suddenly dropped. His eyes were not only freezing cold, they also had a cynical connotation, a murderous aura that made people tremble in fear. Nangong Yu quickly nodded his head. His Highness Prince Jin's eyes were too deep and too bright, as if the deepest and darkest parts of his heart were illuminated, forcing his secrets out with nowhere to hide. Nangong Yu clenched his fist tightly, but could only nod. "Okay." Nangong Yu restrained the fear in his heart and respectfully said to Nangong Luyun, "Don't know what kind of spirit treasure did your Highness Prince Jin choose?" Chapter 634, Treasure Storage Pavilion. 8. Nangong Luyun cast a cynical glance at him, pulled Su Luo along and just left. "Your Highness," Nangong Yu called Nangong Luyun to a stop, pointing to Su Luo and said, "Miss Su must leave behind 2 spirit treasures, her credit wasn't enough." Su Luo nodded, her credit was indeed not enough. Nangong Luyun, however, indifferently snorted, only leaving Nangong Yu with a decisive view of his back. This king has not selected anything. The implication, naturally, was to transfer his credit to Su Luo. "Don't you feel that you have lost out?" Su Luo looked up. Her clear eyes reflected that matchless under the heavens, handsome face of Nangong Liuyun's. Clearly, Nangong Yu had deliberately raised the price. Obviously, they could have haggled over the price. Nangong Luyun was amused as he pinched the tip of her nose. Being too insatiable is very bad. Where am I being insatiable? She simply didn't want to suffer a loss. Nangong Luyun secretly sighed again. This girl, the things in the most valuable treasure pavilion are certainly not something you want to take away, then can carry away. You mean that Nangong Yu deliberately raised the price, making it difficult for me to retreat and avoid defeat? You are actually not stupid. Nangong Luyun smilingly looked at her. His eyes were full of a pampering and spoiling expression. Su Luo frowned slightly. When Nangong Luyun came out, he simply didn't choose any spirit treasure. Perhaps he had already anticipated from the start that Nangong Yu would demand an exorbitant price, like a lion with its mouth wide open? Perhaps. Even forcing Emperor Jin to open the royal treasure storage pavilion was something he had also planned for from the beginning? If it was like this, then Nangong Liuyun's shrewdness was truly too deep. If you chose to be his enemy, how painfully difficult a matter would that be? Take good care of this spirit pinball. At a critical time, it can protect your life. Nangong Liyun especially pointed to the spirit pinball. Soon after, he rubbed her head and exclaimed, This girl, you have offended too many people. Furthermore, each and every one of them were stronger than her. It really made him worry endlessly. You already knew from the beginning, right? Su Luo still finally asked. You forced Emperor Jing to open the treasure storage pavilion, precisely to let me get this spirit pinball? Nangong Liyun knew that she was a space mage, therefore, when they entered the treasure storage pavilion, he had given her a gentle push, pushing her into that room. Recalling the things from before, Su Luo couldn't help but to guess this. Moreover, the more she thought about it, the more she felt it was correct. The corner of Nangong Liuyun's mouth perked up into a demonically charming expression. A girl that is too clever isn't cute. This miss doesn't take the cute route. Su Luo rolled her eyes in annoyance. Although he didn't directly reply to her question, he indirectly gave her an answer. Also, only you would defraud your own family to give me this advantage. As long as you like it, then it's fine. Nangong Liyun smilingly looked at her. The corner of his mouth hooked into a devilishly charming smile that could entice all living things. Two people, talking and laughing, walked away from the imperial palace hand in hand. After they had left, Nangong Yu put on a brave face to give the news to Emperor Jing. What did you say? Emperor Jing, who originally had his head drooping down, depressed, immediately jumped a meter high. He grabbed Nangong Yu's collar. Say that again to your daddy. Because of extreme anger, Emperor Jing even cursed vulgarly. That loathsome girl entered the most valuable treasure pavilion and took away 3 spirit treasures. Nangong Yu's head hung low as he nervously spoke. Didn't I order you to seize this opportunity to kill her? You moron. How could you do something so stupid? You still allowed her to take away 3 spirit treasures and withdraw safely. Emperor Jing nearly went insane from rage. In the end, how did she safely enter the most valuable treasure pavilion and take away those spirit treasures, and then safely leave? Regarding this question from Emperor Jing, Nangong Yu was also quite suspicious. Could it be that loathsome girl is a space mage? Chapter 635. Treasure Storage Pavilion 9. There was only this kind of explanation. It couldn't help but be said that Nangong Yu, you hit upon the truth. However, Emperor Jing clearly didn't believe it. Utter rubbish. Emperor Jing angrily rebuked. If she really was a space mage, how could she have concealed it up until now? Su Zian would have already made it known loudly to all under the heavens like a cicada. A space mage, how distinguished was one? If they, the court, were informed, then the entire Su manor would not be able to run away from the riches and honor. Then, Nangong Yu was puzzled. Second child, it must be him. Emperor Jing angrily roared. It must be second child's sinister plot. What should we do now? Emperor Jing heavily slapped the table. Dispatch people to secretly monitor that loathsome girl. Find an opportunity to make her. Emperor Jing made a slicing off gesture. Nangong Yu accepted the order and departed. At this moment, it seemed as if Emperor Jing had finished venting his anger, his body slumping onto the red sandalwood chair behind him. If it wasn't for the Jade Lakesley family pressuring him so tightly, he, in fact, also didn't want to do that to Su Luo. After all, the news reported to him regarding her. She at such a young age was already a 4th rank. Moreover, she had exceeded the young talented Su Qing and force her to that stage. This was a talent what Eastern Ling lacked the most, were talented people. However, the Jade Lakesley family truly pressured him too tightly. He really hadn't expected that the Li family would even threaten the 4 nations battle competition over this matter of connection by marriage. If the Jade Lakesley family withdrew from the 4 nations battle competition, then Eastern Ling would certainly lose. Furthermore, Eastern Ling would be defeated miserably. No, he absolutely wouldn't allow this kind of thing to happen during his rule. Therefore Nangong Luyuan this time most certainly will marry Li Yaoyao. Emperor Jing's heart was set on this. No matter what methods he must use, he must make Nangong Luyuan and Li Yaoyao into a couple. He wouldn't even mind using what he hated the most, that of the rice having been cooked. 1. Emperor Jing had this kind of secretive and devious plan to break up Nangong Luyuan and Su Luo. The Jade Lakesley family also hadn't stopped for a rest. Since last time, after the battle between the two sisters from Su Manor, the capital entered a tranquil state. Rather, this day suddenly an explosive piece of news was passed along. The Jade Lakes ferry had come to the imperial capital. This news was like a stone dropped into a tranquil, mirror-like lake. Immediately, all the people in the entire imperial capital flared up. How great was the Jade Lakes ferry? Ah, that was the Jade Lakesley family's most distinguished little princess. Furthermore, she was gifted since childhood with extraordinary martial arts. Even more important was that beautiful appearance of hers which was matchless under the heavens. That exceedingly refined temperament. She was simply like a fairy from the 9th layer of heaven, above all the common people. Momentarily, everyone in the imperial capital spread the news, and the news spread continuously, raising the Jade Lakes ferry to the level of a myth. Didn't know if there was also someone adding fuel to the fire. Unexpectedly, there was a rumor that said that the Jade Lakes ferry and His Highness Prince Jean had already been engaged since long ago. Once this news spread, immediately, the fervent atmosphere once again was pushed up like the morning tide. His Highness Prince Jean, the Jade Lakes ferry. One was unsurpassed in martial arts, the other was gifted. One was matchless handsome, the other was devastatingly beautiful. One was unyielding and noble, the other was pure and cold like a lotus. Whether it was talent, appearance or temperament, both of them were the most outstanding among the younger generation. Moreover, they were also childhood sweethearts, growing up together as brother and sister since childhood under the same teacher. Following the rounds of information erupting, the imperial capital was lifted by bursts of frenzy. Everyone was saying that His Highness Prince Jean and the Jade Lakes ferry were a match made in heaven. There were none who were more well-suited than them. Now it seemed as if everyone had forgotten about Su Luo. Everyone was fervently talking about His Highness Prince Jean and the Jade Lakes ferry. They were discussing how well-matched they were, what an ideal couple they were, how they were a match made in heaven. As if they were witnesses that had given evidence to this. 1. The rice having been cooked. Otherwise known as getting pregnant, a plot for a shotgun marriage. Chapter 636. Dispute in a Love Triangle. 1. Inside the wisteria courtyard. Lu Luo was busy with the tasks on hand, but would always raise her head to anxiously look at her Mississippi. Since the miss had gotten up in mourning, she had sit under the wisteria tree to read. Now 6 hours had already passed. Su Luo was calm and composed, in contrast to Lu Luo who was very much scatterbrained. Mississippi. Lu Luo thought for a while. In the end, she still came over, holding an already brewed expensive type of oolong tea, and neatly placed it down. Su Luo only gave a slight grunt, and did not raise her head to look at her. Lu Luo, seeing Su Luo's quiet and peaceful expression, couldn't help but to anxiously stamp her feet. Miss, even at a time like this, how can you still remain so calm? Oh. Su Luo raised her head from the continent's history. Her eyes which were watching Lu Luo were like an ancient well without a single ripple, and the corner of her mouth had a smile. Seeing Su Luo's calm and collected expression which was lacking a single ripple, Lu Luo nearly became angry from being anxious. Miss, why are you not concerned about His Highness Prince Jean? The rumors outside are going crazy. What is being spread? Su Luo, calm and unruffled, picked up the teacup and took a sip. Jade Lakes ferry. Lu Luo was not very accepting, as she snorted while panting in rage. Outside, it has already been widely spread that the Jade Lakes ferry will arrive in the imperial capital. Furthermore, it's even spread that she is the future Princess Jean. Su Luo smiled but didn't speak. Miss, how could the Jade Lakes ferry be Princess Jean? Clearly, you are the true Princess Jean. Lu Luo expressed her strong feeling of being unconvinced. Su Luo had her head lowered as she flipped through the book, the corner of her mouth smiling carelessly. "Oh, you seem to be clearer about this than me?" Lu Luo ran up, with one grab snatching the continent's history from Su Luo's hands, and seriously said to Su Luo, "Miss, you can't go on like this, otherwise His Highness Prince Jin will be snatched away by the Jade Lake's fairy." Su Luo's smile was not quite a smile. If Nangong Luyan was that easily snatched away by another person, then he was unworthy of having her, and unworthy of Su Luo being invested in him. Su Luo took back that book of the continent's history from Lu Luo's hands and unhurriedly flipped through it. Lu Luo saw that happy and content appearance of Su Luo's, and she became so anxious that she kept pacing around Su Luo in circles, walking about. Su Luo remained silent, then lifted up her head to look at Lu Luo. "With you walking around like this, it is making me dizzy, quickly stop walking." Lu Luo saw that Su Luo was paying attention to her, and she hurriedly rushed up and said to her, "Miss, how can you stand it? How can you sit here in a manner of staying out of it? Then you tell me, what should this miss do?" Su Luo closed the book, raised her eyebrows and smiled. "You should go beseech the master. Ah, doesn't the master also look favorably upon the matter of you and His Highness Prince Jin? No matter what, you shouldn't just stay foolishly like this, you have to take the initiative." Lu Luo's eyes shone like the full moon. "Even if you act for His Highness Prince Jin to see, when His Highness Prince Jin sees how much you care about him, once happy, he will abandon whatever that Jade Lake's fairy does for sure, and will run over here to our place." Su Luo glanced at her with a smile. "Foolish Lu Luo, foolish Lu Luo, you still see human nature as too beautiful. Why would Su Zian help her? Do you still remember the matter on that day when this miss returned from the Sunset Mountain Range? When Su Wan complained that I offended Jade Lake's fairy?" Su Luo voluntarily tossed out a sentence. Lu Luo's voice started stammering. Young miss, you are saying the master would..." At that time, master believed that miss had offended the Jade Lake's fairy, and was itching to choke miss to death. Su Luo, meeting Lu Luo's gaze, seriously nodded her head and said, "You should bear in mind in the future, don't seek Su Zian for anything, he is unreliable." Lu Luo saw Su Luo directly calling him Su Zian, rather than dad, and immediately she was dumbfounded. Momentarily, the atmosphere was somewhat strange. Chapter 637, Dispute in a Love Triangle 2. You should just stop worrying, go back into the room and stay there properly. Su Luo pointed to inside the room. "I wouldn't be able to stay still inside, only what should we do?" Lu Luo anxiously paced around inside the room. Suddenly she clapped her hands. "That's right, His Highness Prince Jin. As long as His Highness Prince Jin's heart leans toward miss, then he definitely won't be snatched away." Su Luo cast a laughing glance at this impetuous servant girl. "As for Nangong Luyan, these few days he hasn't dropped by." Lu Luo's complexion suddenly turned pale. "His Highness Prince Jin, he will not be like that. He treats the miss really well, how could he change after seeing someone different? Even if all the men under the heavens would change after seeing someone different, His Highness Prince Jin wouldn't." "Oh, how do you know?" Su Luo smiled lightly. "Isn't this clearly a matter of fact?" Lu Luo earnestly analyzed it for Su Luo. "Before this servant was worried so much that I became muddled. In fact, you see here, before, did His Highness Prince Jin ever like another young lady? Ever give them a good expression? Take the initiative to stick to them? Also, with that kind of soft and tender expression, a spoiling manner. He never did, right?" Su Luo smilingly watched her. Lu Luo continued to give Su Luo her analysis. "However, all of these, His Highness Prince Jin did it all with Mississippi. This clearly illustrates that Miss is the most special existence in His Highness Prince Jin's heart. What does that Jade Lake's fairy count as? Let her stay on the side." Su Luo watched this girl and couldn't help but smile slightly. She put the book aside and carelessly said, "They, however, are childhood sweethearts, who knows?" "Oh, that's right. I heard that the Jade Lake's fairy will enter the city today, right?" "Yeah." Lu Luo solemnly nodded. Within the capital, for many days, this day had been spread around like crazy. Everyone wanted to catch a glimpse of the Jade Lake's fairy's real appearance. Now for sure the entire city would have turned up. Lu Luo also wanted to see what the Mrs. Love rival really looked like. Let's go. Su Luo tossed the book to Lu Luo and smoothed down the non-existent wrinkles on her skirt. Where to? Lu Luo felt it was quite odd. When the miss went out, she had never brought her along. Today was the first time that this had ever happened. Go join in the fun. The corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into an enigmatic smile. Not only did Lu Luo want to see the Jade Lake's fairy, Su Luo also wanted to see her. She wanted to see Nangong Luyin and the Jade Lake's fairies meeting. Ought to be what kind of spectacle? Really made a person look forward to it with expectations. Today's capital seemed more lively and bustling than the former days. Inside the city, the streets were scrubbed 3 times, and every house was draped in red silk as a sign of honor. It was overflowing with lights and vibrant colors for the sake of only welcoming one person. Now it was already noon. The autumn sun shone brightly and was mildly warm. Both sides of the streets were already full of people, mountains and oceans deep. Everyone stood on tiptoes to peer over the crowd, only trying to catch a glimpse of that elegant fairy. That person was precisely Jade Lakely family's little princess, the Jade Lake's fairy. The capital's most busting full-moon brothel, in a private room on the 2nd floor. Su Luo was dressed up as a male, wearing a white-colored robe that danced elegantly in the wind. Delicate, pretty, neat and smart, with an extraordinary temperament. Lu Luo was in a simple light blue robe dressed as a student. Now, she was attending to her on the side, boiling water and pouring tea for Su Luo. A faint sound could be heard coming from outside of the rolled-up curtain. I heard that the Jade Lake's fairy is goddess-like and devastatingly beautiful. She is the #1 beauty in Eastern Ling Empire. Simply unforgettable after one glance. Beautiful. That beauty is naturally one that will shake one to the core. The most important thing is temperament. That pureness and coldness is like a snow lotus in an iceberg. Noble and unsullied temperament. Ah, I heard even His Highness Prince Jean is mesmerized to the point of being head over heels in love. Is this really true? Even His Highness Prince Jean is captivated by her? That is what kind of beauty, ah! Everyone simultaneously cried out in surprise. How could this little princess from the Jade Lake Palace be someone us ordinary folks can easily see? Today's opportunity is hard to come by. In the future, if you still want to get a glimpse of the Jade Lake's fairy, then it would certainly be difficult. Chapter 638. Dispute in a Love Triangle 3. That's right, that's right. If I can really see her once, then in this life, I will have no regret. Wasn't it said that His Highness Prince Jean and that 4th miss from Su Manor are together and very close? What, now he is linked to the little princess from the Jade Lake Palace? The 4th miss from Su Manor? Humph, are you talking about that good-for-nothing Su Luo? You really value her too high. How could His Highness Prince Jean fancy that kind of woman? Stop joking. That certainly is not right. His Highness Prince Jean truly treats Su Luo, Miss Su, really well. I heard before that him destroying the Crown Princess's businesses was also to help Su Luo to demand repayment of a debt from the Crown Prince. That Su Luo first stole her older sister's fiancé. Afterwards, she forced her older sister to the degree of making her handicapped. Now whether she is alive or dead is unknown. This kind of malicious woman, how could His Highness Prince take a fancy to? Are you guys regarding His Highness Prince Jean as a collector of trash? Besides, I ask you, if you were to pick between the Jade Lake's fairy or that Su Luo, who will you choose? Naturally, I will choose the Jade Lake's fairy. Does this even require thinking? Then, how many hundreds of times smarter is His Highness Prince Jean compared to us? Could he choose wrongly? Therefore, we should not worry about this for no reason. This Princess Jean is absolutely the Jade Lake's fairy, no escaping it. A group of people that originally had some hesitations in their hearts, after hearing the words of this person, they all nodded their heads in agreement, showing approval that what he said was reasonable. Private room. The private room was only separated by a curtain. The quality of soundproofing was extremely poor. As a result, this dialogue was clearly transmitted to the ears of the master and servant pair inside. Luluo's complexion was flushed from anger. Her hand that carried the teapot trembled slightly, the tea water flowing out. Too insulting. What was known as His Highness Prince Jean was collecting trash. Her family's miss was the best and smartest miss under the heavens. Obviously, His Highness Prince Jean, in order to get closer to her family's miss, had personally delivered breakfast for her. How could you say that His Highness Prince Jean was collecting trash? It was simply absurd. With a bang sound, she directly slammed down the teapot heavily. Looking shrewish with both hands at her hips, she was just about to go out and argue with those people. Su Luo slanted her a faint glance. With just this glance, she was able to make Lu Luo stand still. "Miss, you are just going to allow these people to talk rubbish?" Lu Luo was infuriated until her entire body was trembling. Obviously, it was His Highness Prince Jean who incessantly chased after the miss. Why was it that when these people said it, it was completely the opposite? This was not fair. Lu Luo indignantly glared at those gossipy people outside. She secretly thought in her heart, wait until a chance to encounter His Highness Prince Jean. She must tell His Highness what was said and let him hear it. Let him give the miss some justice. Now all of a sudden, the sound of surprised yells came from outside. Quickly look, the Jade Lake's ferry has arrived. Momentarily, everyone's eyes gazed towards the street. Their movements were uniformed and orderly, falling as one. It seemed as if they had practiced it countless times before. The people sitting near the window were fortunate. Those that were not close to the window, for a moment, all of them, without exception, rushed to the window. "Hey, don't squeeze in, you guys. Stand properly, stand properly. Hey, I am still eating the dish on the table. You guys don't step on it. Hey, don't crawl up my back, ouch, hey, too heavy, I'm about to die." Outside was a huge area of noise. All of it was because of one person. She was called the Jade Lake's Fairy. Su Luo weighted the teacup in her hand, her gaze carelessly looking there accordingly. From the distant sky came the sound of skillful heavenly music. About 10 women dressed in plain white gowns came along. Their hands carried wicker baskets and were constantly tossing out flower petals. The flower petals fluttered about flowingly, making them appear extremely graceful and agile in mid-air. Their facial features were pretty, although they were not matchless beauties. However, every one of them was quite pretty, beautiful, and elegant. To say nothing of the fact that every one of them knew martial arts. Chapter 639. Dispute in a Love Triangle 4. Their speed was just right for being graceful. Their slender waists were so supple, making it seem as if they were boneless. They danced in the breeze like fairies walking on waves, in an otherworldly manner that was extraordinary and refined. Oh heavens, these women! With regards to their appearance, every one of them, if they were to walk out, would not be lacking when compared to a daughter from a rich family. Moreover, in just this one appearance, there were 10 of them. These are the Jade Lake's Fairy servant girls. Someone made a fistful of certainty. Even the Jade Lake's Fairy servant girls are all this beautiful. One can well imagine how devastatingly beautiful she herself is. It is truly something to look forward to. For a moment, everyone's tongues were wagging spiritedly, numerous flattering words were piled up on the Jade Lake's Fairy's body. With regards to her, they had deep expectations. Under the escort of the numerous women, the Jade Lake's Fairy's imperial chariot arrived elegantly. That was a flying imperial chariot being pulled by a brightly colored phoenix. The surroundings of the imperial chariot were filled full with fresh flowers, with the petals flowing around, romantic and aesthetically pleasing. Sitting in the imperial chariot was a woman dressed in white, pure and holy like snow. Her body was delicate and elegant, seemingly dancing in the wind carefreely, her facial features faintly discernible. But that short glance was already sufficient to make everyone's eyes vertical, so beautiful. Beauty that has vanished from the earthly world. Exceptional and matchless. In the heavens and on earth, so unique. This kind of woman, how could His Highness Prince Jin's heart not be moved? That love-struck fool from the Su family, when compared to the Jade Lake's Fairy, that is simply... Hey, is there something wrong with you? How could you bring up anyone to be compared to the Jade Lake's Fairy? How could these inferior people even be compared together? The people in the crowd nearly started to quarrel again. All eyes were opened wide, looking at that pure and holy Jade Lake's fairy, like a fairy descending to earth from the 9th layer of heaven. Everyone had become foolish from looking, as if having an out-of-body experience. Not long after, the brightly colored phoenix slowly stopped. The Jade Lake's fairy slowly emerged from the imperial chariot. They saw her exquisite and perfect facial features with which you couldn't find a single fault. Her ink-like eyes were slightly misty like liquid fog. Her red lips glistened with a sparkling and translucent luster. Her skin smooth and fair with jade-like bones. She had exquisite curves. More importantly, her temperament was like a serene orchid in an unoccupied valley, with a kind of serene, pure and cold beauty. Just gazing at her made a person feel inferior. In the split second that she appeared, practically everyone that cared held their breath. Their dazed gazes foolishly stared at her. They had a very surreal feeling. Wasn't this exactly like a live fairy descending to the mundane world from the 9th layer of the heavens? She was simply perfect without a fault and so pure, as if even the sunlight was diminished because of her. In front of the Jade Lake's fairy stood a man. He was dressed in a soft, black, silk robe with gold and silver threads drawing the outline of the claw of a dragon with scales which were fierce and imposing. His fine, ink-like, black hair was carelessly tied up by red silk. The tassels of his jade belt lightly fluttered in the wind, also making him appear even more elegant. At this moment he jumped down from the dragon-scaled horse, to stand in front of the Jade Lake's fairy. He had a gentle, lazy expression on his matchless handsome face. The corner of his mouth was hooked in a demonically charming smile. "Third senior brother, did you come to welcome me?" Seeing the man that commanded her soul and leading it as if in a dream, even the often serene Jade Lake's fairy was also unable to suppress her excitement. His Highness Prince Jean. That is His Highness Prince Jean. Now everyone had recognized. The man that came down from the horse was the male lead of the rumors. Perhaps some people might not recognize His Highness Prince Jean, but that respectable and insufferably arrogant dragon-scaled horse was known to everyone. At this moment, the male and female lead of the rumors stood face to face. The male was incomparably handsome with an unrestrained shallow and gentle smile at the corner of his mouth. The female was beautiful and elegant, with intoxicating, tender sentiments flashing through the depths of her eyes. In a split second, everyone, without exception, became impassioned. The gossiping trait in their body ignited into a flame that then spread throughout their whole body, appearing prominently on their faces. You guys look, His Highness Prince Jean is looking towards us here. He actually smiled at me. Fart, that smile was aimed at me. Several normally gentle-tempered women in the prime of their youth, because of arguing about who His Highness Prince Jean smiled at, started a huge fight. But everyone was quite baffled. Obviously, the Jade Lake's fairy was standing in front of His Highness Prince Jean. Why would he even turn his head around to smile at them? Only Su Luo knew. That smile at the corner of Nangong Liuyun's mouth was raised towards her. A thread of gloominess flashed through Su Luo's heart. Her fists clenched firmly. Since he knew she was sitting here, he shouldn't have done something like this that would attract misunderstandings. Otherwise, she would certainly not be polite. At this time, everyone was puzzled. The Jade Lake's fairy was also like this. Third senior brother. The Jade Lake's fairy reached out to hold His Highness Prince Jin's hand. Her voice was soft with a touch of tempting charm. Only in front of Nangong Luyun, the Jade Lake's fairy, who was proud as a snow lotus, would lower herself to be submissive in order to please him. Nangong Luyun lowered his head, didn't know what he said in the Jade Lake fairy's ear, to actually make her smile repeatedly. But very quickly a huge, unforeseen event appeared. Didn't know what the Jade Lake's fairy had said, and Nangong Luyun's complexion suddenly changed. He heavily pushed away her hand without the slightest of hesitation. As the Jade Lake's fairy wasn't prepared, she was pushed away several steps. Chapter 641. Dispute in a Love Triangle 6. Afterwards, she lifted her head and looked at Nangong Luyun in disbelief. Her pair of beautiful eyes was misty and teary. Out of those present at the scene, besides the Jade Lake's fairy, the rest were also in disbelief. What exactly just happened here? They were just fine. So, why did His Highness Prince Jean push the Jade Lake's fairy away? The Jade Lake's fairy's weeping appearance seemed very pitiful and distressed people's heart. It made people wish they could place all the beautiful things before her. These were the heartfelt thoughts of the many men at the scene. Yet Nangong Luyun arrogantly looked down from above, merely giving the Jade Lake's fairy an indifferent glance, then turned around to leave. Third senior brother. The Jade Lake's fairy, choked with emotion, shouted to stop him. Nangong Luyun stopped in his tracks but did not turn around. At this point, the Jade Lake's fairy had already stopped caring about being embarrassed. She rushed forward and embraced him from behind, pressing her gentle and beautiful cheek against his back. Third senior brother, please don't abandon Yao Yao, okay? She cried, choked with emotion and looking indescribably miserable and wronged. Under thousands of eyes, the Jade Lake's fairy, who normally was as cold as a lotus, was willing to do something like this. It was really like an invitation for the other party to trample all over her pride. Her right now had thrown all caution to the wind. Nangong Liuyun's body was slightly startled. Li Yao Yao. He gave a light sigh and reached out to pry her slender fingers away from where they were tightly wrapped around his abdomen. Even though he was a cold and fickle person, however, for the sake of their friendship from growing up together, it was not something he said he could erase, and it would be erased. No, I don't want to. Third senior brother, I beg you, please don't. The Jade Lake's fairy cried beautifully like raindrops on a pear blossom, until she was nearly unable to breathe. That continuous sound of pleading, mournful weeping, made people hearing it shed tears. The Jade Lake's fairy really is too pitiful. She has such a deeply rooted love for His Highness Prince Jean, but it seems His Highness Prince Jean, His Royal Highness, has a very hard heart. Where can you find such a beautiful woman on this earth? Yet he actually doesn't want her? That's truly called being too fortunate to not know when he is blessed. You know, fart. Our Highness Prince Jin's foresight is great. This sort of young, unmarried maiden from a rich family who knows no shame, always looking at and inappropriately holding on to men. Our Highness Prince Jean could not possibly afford to have her. That's right. Clinging to a man in such a public place with such a large crowd. This sort of woman, which man can endure her? In broad daylight and under so many watching eyes, she would do such a disgraceful and impolite thing. Is this Jade Lake's fairy really as pure as ice and spotless as the rumors say? Sure doesn't seem like it. For a moment, everyone immediately divided into several factions. There was the faction that supported His Highness Prince Jean and strongly believed that no matter what His Highness Prince Jean did, he was absolutely right. There were some that sympathized and pitied the Jade Lake's fairy, wishing they could reincarnate to be the embodiment of brave men. They wished to become her firm support and safe harbor. As for the third faction that was more rational and intelligent, they had already begun to suspect whether there were other secrets behind the Jade Lake's fairy's pure as ice and spotless reputation. At this time, the Jade Lake's fairy was still wrapped tightly around Nangong Liuyun's waist, refusing to let go. Third senior brother, don't go. Don't go. Her tone was entreating, not leaving a trace of face saving for herself. The corner of Nangong Liuyun's mouth hooked into an unrestrained, indifferent sneer. His tall and slim figure was straight as a bamboo stalk. His gaze was able to cross over the layers of people and fix itself directly onto the people in the private room on the second floor. At this time, Su Luo, who had sat down leisurely to watch the show, had her long, shapely eyebrows creased slightly. With the way that Nangong Luyun was staring at her, what was he doing? At this moment, time seemed to freeze. The whole world had become quiet, and nobody said a word. Seeing that Su Luo still was not heading towards him, a pained smile flashed across Nangong Liuyun's eyes. In the end, she still would not come out. Chapter 642. Dispute in a Love Triangle 7. At this moment, he felt that Li Yao Yao, who was hugging him, was somewhat pitiful, and that he himself was as pitiful as her. Bitterly awaiting, foolishly wrapped around their finger, praying for a thread of tender feelings from the other side. How they resembled each other. Both were pitiful creatures in love. While Nangong Luyun was in the midst of his sad thoughts, suddenly, a figure in white arrived by stepping on air, and determinedly stood in front of him. Su Luo glared at Nangong Luyun in displeasure, her features shrouded in cold frost. Her tone was ice-cold like millennium-old ice. Nangong Luyun, you dare to let her hug you again, just try it. She arrived like a queen, in an imposing and vigorous manner. The hands that Nangong Luyun had clenched tightly by his side suddenly loosened. He appeared to have forgotten, and tossed aside the Jade Lake's fairy as if she were rags. That pair of always deep, boundless and beautiful eyes was brimming with happiness from having been emotionally moved. Luo Luo. Who would have known that Su Luo, with one move, would push him away? The smell on your body really stinks to death, beat it. That was the smell of having been hugged by the Jade Lake's fairy. Nangong Luyun didn't even think, and in passing, tore apart that robe and got rid of it. What made Su Luo bewildered was that his body was still clothed in the same color, and same style of black as ink robe. He actually wore two of the exact same robes together, tearing one off, and there was still another one? This clearly illustrated that the bastard was basically already prepared for this earlier. Now everyone's gazes were staring fixedly at them, watching this dramatic change of scene in the play. Who was the woman that appeared later? She actually ordered His Highness Prince Jin to get rid of the Jade Lake's fairy. And what amazed them was that His Highness Prince Jin really did do as she ordered. Moreover, his action of shaking off the Jade Lake's fairy was so boorish, so ruthless, in a manner that was without a bit of tender protective feelings for the fairer sex. This is the fourth miss from Su Manor. Su Luo? Could it be she is that Su Luo? Exactly that Su Luo. On the day of the life and death duel, I placed a bet on her, the one completely unknown, to win, ha 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 ha. Now all the gazes were focused on Su Luo's body. The Jade Lake's fairy that had tumbled to the ground now looked extremely bedraggled and wretched. She had discarded her pride, abandoned her dignity, but what it was exchanged for was being ruthlessly trampled on by Nangong Luyun. Now no one could hate Su Luo as much as her. That pair of eyes dipped in poison. A fierce and pungent gaze. It was like a poisoned arrow shooting towards Su Luo, wishing she could immediately dismember Su Luo into 10,000 pieces. A maid went over to help the Jade Lake's fairy up. But the Jade Lake fairy's eyes, even now, were hazy with tears. So pitiful, like the delicate white lotus flower being windswept and battered by rain. Third senior brother, how can you treat me like this? How can you? It seemed as if she was overly broken-hearted, her despair at the peak. Her body swayed weakly, falling onto the maid's shoulder. That appearance of the Jade Lake's fairy being so broken-hearted and in despair, suddenly stirred up and moved countless male hearts greatly. That was not a stranger, she was the goddess in their hearts. Now, the goddess was bullied by someone until she was like this. One could well imagine the wrath in their hearts. However, all of Nangong Luyun's thoughts were placed completely on Su Luo's body. No matter how miserably the Jade Lake fairy cried, it still would not have the slightest effect on him. However, when he saw countless number of wrathful gazes converging onto his treasured Luo's body, this made his complexion haze over in a flash. Nangong Luyun's hand held onto Su Luo's tightly, then turned around towards Li Yaoyao, raised his eyebrow and smiled demonically. Miss Li, what are you talking about? Once these words were said, Li Yaoyao's complexion momentarily became deathly white as the color of snow. Miss Li, such an unfamiliar way of addressing her? Just as if, between them, they were as indifferent as strangers. Third senior brother. The Jade Lake fairy's body swayed, almost as if in the next moment, she would fall. Nangong Luyun frowned slightly, a faint expression of annoyance flashing across his face. Chapter 643. Dispute in a Love Triangle. 8. Nangong Luyun coldly smiled. Miss Li, this king is not familiar with you and never had a sister apprentice like you. In the future, when you address me, please pay some attention to how you call me. How could he be like this? Being treated like this by the man she loved the most. The Jade Lake's fairy was in despair and also furious at the same time. Her entire body was trembling slightly. Nangong Luyan swayed his and Su Luo's hands that were linked by their 10 fingers back and forth. His gaze inspected their surroundings once, his ice-cold tone ringing out. Everyone saw it clearly, this is the real future Princess Jean. If there are people that dare to admit this under false pretenses, they will have to take responsibility for the consequences. Once these words were said, everyone was in an uproar. The Jade Lake's fairy's figure began to tremble even more violently. Afterwards, Nangong Luyan didn't even glance at her. Pulling along Su Luo, he immediately turned to leave. Among the crowd, everyone was all holding their breath with rapt attention. They didn't even dare to breathe. If His Highness Prince Jean was really to flip out, all of them were not enough for him to kill in one move. The originally noisy, vast crowd at this moment was as quiet as the night. The wind blowing with the sounds of leaves falling could be heard clearly. The throng of people very quickly separated out, revealing a wide strip of pavement. Nangong Luyan leaped up and mounted the horse. He was sitting on the horse's back and leaned over to pull Su Luo up on the horse's back. The proud and pampered dragon-scaled horse scattered open all 4 hooves, stirring up a lot of dust from the ground, galloped quickly and left, only leaving behind the rear view that was clear, cold and noble. Whoosh! Only now did everyone exhale out that turbid air in their throats. The male lead for this incident had already left, therefore, everyone's line of sight, as a matter of course, landed upon the Jade Lake's fairy's body. The originally pure, cold and noble fairy, now, the fairy seemed battered and exhausted. This contrast was really too great. Moreover, everyone was all curious. The Jade Lake's fairy's noble and icily arrogant temper would really disregard everything to hug His Highness Prince Jean? Everyone was doubtful and puzzled. Su Luo also could not resolve this puzzle after much thought. Nangong Luyan sat behind Su Luo's body, both hands encircled around her waist and holding the reins. His warm breath was being released by her ear. He also deliberately leaned in close, pretending to be nonchalant while stealthily nipping at her earlobe. Su Luo glanced back, exasperatedly casting him a glance. In broad daylight on the main street, can you be a little more well-behaved, okay? Nangong Luyan felt rather regretful. Let's find a place with no one around. Then this king can be affectionate and intimate with you once again. Why are your thoughts so dirty? And you are still His Highness Prince Jean. Su Luo disdainfully said to him. His Highness Prince Jean is also a man. Being a male, his blood vessels will become vigorous and extend because of the woman he loves. Su Luo felt that if she continued with this topic, it would become dangerous, and her beautiful gaze moved with a bright idea, then said, "Oh, that's right. Before, what did you say to Li Yaoyao? Making it so that she didn't even want her own self-respect, and appealed to you in public? In theory, using common sense, with the Jade Lake Fairy's respectability, no matter how infatuated she was with Nangong Luyan, she still wouldn't do something like this. After all, in that kind of environment, the Jade Lake's Fairy didn't just represent only herself. She also represented the Jade Lake Palace." Nangong Luoyun's water caltrip-shaped lips hooked up, expelling a warm breath by the side of Su Luo's sensitive ear. "Are you very curious?" His voice carried a trace of natural charm, making a person's heart feel as if thousands of larvae were crawling past, silky, numbing and tickling. "Are you going to say it or not?" Su Luo reached out with her hands to stop him by holding onto his waist. It was rare to see this little appearance of Su Luo pouting playfully, so Nangong Luoyun's mood was extremely good. With a philanderer's gaze, he looked at her cheeks that were bright and clean like jade. This time he arrogantly and lovably said, "Want to know? Then you must give this king a kiss." This old cheap trick again still hadn't changed to a new one. Su Luo slanted her body to give his lips a kiss. "All right now." "Barely adequate." Nangong Luyan complacently humped twice. Actually, this king only said one sentence to her. "What sentence?" Su Luo asked. Chapter 644. Dispute in a Love Triangle, 9. Nangong Luyan gave a profoundly mysterious smile, leaned close to Su Luo's ears and said a sentence in a low voice. Su Luo lightly swept Nangong Luyan a glance, turning her body around as a quick-witted expression flashed through her beautiful eyes. The corner of Nangong Liuyun's mouth hooked up slightly. He embraced Su Luo's slender and delicate waist and gave a loud shout. Faster, the dragon-scaled horse released all four hooves, raising up the dust with a speed that was nearly as fast as the wind as they returned. By the time Su Luo returned to the manor, it was already nightfall. When she took a step into Su Manor, she felt that the atmosphere in the manor was somewhat strange. The servants who saw her, their expression was complex. There was respect as well as fear. One after another, they walked away and fled. Mississippi. After Su Luo was carried away by Nangong Liuyun, Lu Luo had already returned to the manor. Now she was standing guard at the doorway. Seeing that Su Luo had returned, she anxiously ran to her. "What's wrong?" Su Luo frowned. The atmosphere in the manor was quite strange. "Miss, a matter that is far from good." Lu Luo's expression was somewhat anxious. "I heard that today's matter made the master go into a huge rage." Before Lu Luo could finish speaking, an unsympathetic figure, without a sound, appeared by Su Luo's side. "The fourth miss, the master asked to see you." Zishi's tone was eternally cold, completely lacking any temperature. It was still that same study. Last time, because of Su Qing's matter, he loudly reprimanded her. Then, what about this time? A hidden light in Su Luo's pitch black as night pupils appeared faintly, the corner of her mouth hooking into a cold smile. Unhurriedly, she pushed open that thick door. Su Zian sat behind the long desk in the round, wide and red sandalwood chair. The window was not opened. The lighting inside the room was dark and gloomy. Su Zian's complexion would suddenly be bright then dark, hard to see clearly. Zishi noiselessly closed the door. In that moment, inside the study remained a father-daughter pair with unfamiliar feelings. Su Zian sat there, cold and detachedly. Su Luo stood there with hands hanging down. Neither of them spoke. The surroundings were awfully quiet. Suddenly Su Zian's gaze swept towards Su Luo, like a frosty light shooting towards her. "Su Luo, today you and His Highness Prince Jin's conduct, do you know how big a blunder you have made?" Su Zian's tone was apathetic without a touch of heat. On Su Luo's face was a breezy, clean and spring-like smile. "Made a blunder? How can that be? Wait until this daughter becomes Princess Jin. Daddy will also have great benefits, isn't that so?" Absurd. Su Zian, seeing Su Luo's, "I will continue to do as I please" manner, immediately, the fury in his chest erupted. He pointed at Su Luo and bellowed, "You have the cheek to say these kind of words. Don't you know any shame? How did your mother teach you?" The tip of Su Luo's lips rose slightly, evoking into a taunting sneer. "Mother certainly did not teach me anything. If father wanted to admonish a person, shouldn't mother be invited here too?" The mother here naturally referred to Madame Su. Su Zian's mouth full of wrath was choked back in his chest, couldn't go up nor down, stifling him until it was extremely painful to bear. One could only see him slam his palm heavily on the table. "No matter what, you must not marry His Highness Prince Jin. You should avail yourself and let this heart have an early demise." Su Luo's long, shapely eyebrows nodded. "Why is father like this? Could it be that His Highness Prince Jin is not outstanding enough?" "Precisely because he is too outstanding, therefore, you are unworthy of him. He is what kind of giant among men? Only worthy to be matched with Li Yaoyao's kind of fairy-like woman." Su Zian's gaze showed a deep frost. "Whereas you, Su Luo, look at yourself. What part of you can be compared even a little bit to the Jade Lake's fairy? You are inferior to even one of her fingers. Don't tell me you have no such self-knowledge." "So belittling of her?" Su Luo looked at him indifferently, gave a sneer and said, "Is this something a father would say to their daughter? People who don't know may be under the impression that Li Yaoyao is your real daughter instead." Chapter 645, Dispute in a Love Triangle 10. Su Luo. "You are courting death." Su Zian flew into a rage out of humiliation, one hand about to slap towards Su Luo's face. He was the great general that protected this nation. Normally, he was accustomed to strutting around. Who would dare to retort back to him? Now this loathsome girl repeatedly put him on the spot in an awkward situation. Su Luo waved her hand. The little divine dragon appeared on top of Su Luo's shoulder and bit down on Su Zian's hand. Su Zian was frightened into jumping up. Fast as lightning, his hand withdrew. Only this avoided a tragedy from taking place. His heart still had some lingering fear as he glared at Su Luo, itching to swat her to death. But Su Luo merely stood there indifferently, with expression as tranquil as water. Honorable father, in the end, what did you want to do? Listening to his intent, it didn't seem as if he wanted to completely have her and Nangong Luyan break up. Su Zian gave a cold snort, tossed his sleeves and turned his body around. You are Su Zian's daughter, how could I treat you unfairly? Su Luo smiled secretly in her heart. Not treating her unfairly? This was too difficult to say. One could only see Su Zian snort coldly. It's merely that Jade Lake Palace had always taken part in an alliance with Eastern Ling Empire as a peaceful nation that coexisted. If it was because of you, loathsome girl, that causes the alliance to collapse, you would be the person condemned by history. The beautiful woman that brought calamity to the nation. Person condemned by history? Beautiful woman that brought calamity to the nation? Such huge criminal charges. The corner of Su Luo's mouth maintained her cold, indifferent smile. Su Zian had his back to Su Luo, therefore, he didn't see the mocking expression on her face. He still continued to pompously say, "This father has already apologized on your behalf to His Majesty. Fortunately, His Majesty was magnanimous and merciful. He didn't overly blame you." That Emperor Jing being magnanimous and merciful? Maybe he was itching to send people to finish her off with one slice to resolve his hate, right? Su Luo coldly snorted in her heart. Having spread out so many covers, Su Zian finally got to the main topic. This father originally thought to separate you from His Highness Prince Jin, but His Majesty was kind. He decided to let you marry His Highness Prince Jin with the status of a concubine at the same time as he marries the Jade Lake Fairy. The status of a concubine? Su Luo's pair of ice-cold eyes, like waves, flickered. The corner of her mouth hooked into a smile that was not quite a smiling intent. Was this the great idea that you guys came up with? This is the best method. Su Zian pointed at Su Luo, his appearance unprecedentedly solemn. If you still have other ideas, don't blame this father for being merciless and cruel. What? Is father afraid that Jade Lake Palace, because of Li Yaoniao's matter, would take out their anger on Su Manor? As a result, the cowardly you would rather use both hands to deliver His Highness Prince Jin, this son-in-law, to the Jade Lake Palace? The smile on Su Luo's face became increasingly more brilliant. However, her pitch-black eyes had an indescribable frost and lack of regard. Having Su Luo speak directly to the heart of the matter, Su Zian's old, brazen face suddenly became frost. He simply stopped trying to cover it up and directly gave a sneering sound. Do you really believe that His Highness Prince Jin would choose you and not the Jade Lake's Fairy? He merely had a falling out with the Jade Lake's Fairy. Wait until they reconcile. Where would there be a place for you to stand? Able to marry His Highness Prince Jin as a concubine is already your biggest fortune. Su Luo, you should be content with this situation. Su Zian's words undoubtedly were sharp and unkind. Moreover, it did not show mercy or spare her embarrassment. If the Su Luo now was still the same Su Luo from before. If Su Luo didn't know that Su Zian was not her actual biological father, perhaps she would have been sad and depressed. But it just so happened that the her right now was already not that timid and weak Su Luo from before. Su Luo lifted up her head and coldly watched Su Zian. Her pitch-black pupils could nearly illuminate Su Zian's face. Since it's like this, then you just wait and see. When the time comes, see who is the person who will be married to Nangong Luyan. Li Yaoyao, in pursuit of wanting to be married to Nangong Luyan, what other methods wouldn't you use? Su Luo coldly smiled in her heart. Chapter 646, Dispute in a Love Triangle 11. After she finished speaking, Su Luo turned around and immediately walked away. Su Zian roared in anger at her rear view. Su Luo, if you dare to marry yourself to His Highness Prince Jin without permission, you should know the consequences yourself. Su Luo glanced back, smiling brilliantly. Didn't the great General Su say that I, Su Luo, cannot be compared to even one of the Jade Lake's fairy's finger? Didn't you say that wait until His Highness Prince Jean had reconciled with the Jade Lake's fairy? Then there wouldn't be a place for me? Since you have so much confidence in the Jade Lake's fairy, then what are you worried about? This remark once said immediately made Su Zian stop and stare blankly, like the contradiction between a spear and a shield. 1. See how Su Zian would break this puzzle. Seeing Su Zian's complexion turn ashen from fury, the corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into an indifferent sneer, and soon after she left the study. Compared to the oppressive atmosphere inside the study, the air outside could be said to be much fresher and cleaner. Wisteria Courtyard. Miss, drink a mouthful of water to cool your temper. Lu Luo, seeing that Su Luo's complexion was not good, hurriedly stepped forward to attend to her. Su Luo held the teacup and little by little, her mouth curved into a smile. It's fine, your family's miss is not angry. But miss, you just came out from master's study in a rage. If I did not act that way, how would the Jade Lakesley family let down their guard? A cold light flashed through Su Luo's eyes. How could the little divine dragon's perception be the same as ordinary people's? As a result, she knew that an expert from the Jade Lakesley family was hidden in the corner of the study. The more arrogant and despotic she acted, only then would the Jade Lakesley family relax their vigilance. Lu Luo suddenly realized. Su Luo weighed the teacup in her hand, her eyes sparkling with complex rays of light. Because Nangong Luyin provoked Li Yaoyao, and on top of that, the Jade Lakesley family that was behind Li Yaoyao. Now Su Luo's situation was truly somewhat bleak. However, how could Li Yaoyao agree to become his concubine? Perhaps she wanted to bring Su Luo over and justifiably torment her? The corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into an apathetic sneer. As to being a concubine, she, Su Luo, would never share a male in this lifetime with another woman. The days passed peacefully. For a few days, it was all calm and quiet. Also, no one seemed to mention that so-called matter of becoming a concubine again. However, Su Luo had a premonition of an imminent storm coming. Her heart was faintly uneasy. On this day, Su Luo was just sitting cross-legged cultivating. Suddenly, from the doorway, came the sound of hurried footsteps. Lu Luo trotted in with her head full of perspiration, and anxiously pulled Su Luo to a stop. Miss, a huge bad event occurred. Don't be so flustered. If you have something to say it slowly. It's not like the sky is falling. Su Luo picked up a cup of water and handed it to her. Lu Luo swallowed the entire cup of water in one gulp, and she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Miss, something happened to the young master, your older brother. Just at this moment, a loud bang sound came from the door to the Wisteria Courtyard. Su Luo's long, shapely eyebrows knitted slightly as she brought Lu Luo along to walk out. She could hear numerous disorderly footstep sounds nearing from afar. Along with the sounds of those footsteps, Su Luo was very clear about who was leading them. She had just arrived in the main hall, and saw Sushi bring a crowd of people, rushing in grandiosely. Today Sushi was dressed in a scarlet gown, her entire person looking like a flaming fireball, overbearingly aggressive. When Sushi saw Su Luo, a strong hatred flashed across her furious face. Her finger pointed to Su Luo. People come, surround Su Luo. For a moment, several experts swarmed around, trying to move against Su Luo. However, before their body even got close to Su Luo, one could see two shadowy figures fly out from the side. They immediately hit these people in the chest. Pung pung pung, a series of fierce hitting sounds echoed. After the sounds had finished echoing, one could see the experts that had followed Sushi's order to capture Su Luo lying on the ground. 1. Contradiction between a spear and a shield. This is about the story of how the Chinese word for contradictory comes from the Chinese character for spear and shield. The story goes that a long time ago, a person was selling a spear and a shield in a market. He would hold up the spear and say, "This spear is so strong it would pierce any shield." Then he would hold up the shield in his other hand and say, "This shield is so strong as to break off any spear." After hearing this, a person walked up to this seller and asked, "If the spear is so strong as to pierce your shield, while the shield is so strong as to break the spear, in the end which is stronger?" The seller was unable to answer this question because of the inherent contradiction in his words. Thus came about the Chinese vocabulary for contradiction, composed of the Chinese characters for spear and shield. This story was in my Chinese language studies book for first grade in China. I had forgotten the exact question that someone asked of the seller. Chapter 647. Dispute in a Love Triangle. 12. Every one of them was throwing up blood, with incomplete bodies, so dead as to be unable to die again. What ruthless and bloody methods! Whereas those people dressed in black that rushed out from the side had already disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had never appeared. Su Shi's entire person became rigid on the spot as she foolishly stared blankly at Su Luo, with her lips trembling slightly, because the feeling the people dressed in black gave her was too shocking, too brutal. Su Luo. What kind of sinister plot are you scheming? Su Shi did her best to restrain her shivering heart, biting down on her teeth and stiffly cursed in a rage. Su Luo glanced at her indifferently. You should acknowledge your mistake, those are people not ghosts. Who are they? You actually dared to secretly hide men in the manor. Before Su Shi had finished speaking, one black shadow attacked towards her face. Fifth Miss, look out! Quite a few servants moved in front of Su Shi to block the attack. No matter how fast their speed was, how could they be faster than the little divine dragon who was known for his speed? One could see his little body suddenly move right, then left, and all of a sudden, he broke through the defense of these people. He charged in, heavily slapping Su Shi's mouth. The little divine dragon's claws were not ordinary. How sharp were they? Su Shi, as a mere minor third rank, how could she dodge it? At the time when a scary, spraying bloody mist appeared, the little divine dragon had already flown back into Su Luo's sleeves, as if he had never appeared. Su Luo, in a spoiling manner, rubbed under his chin as the little divine dragon happily rolled around in her sleeves. One person and one spirit pet were extremely happy from playing around, but had made Su Shi suffer bitter hardship. It was quite a while before Su Shi was aware that her face had been wounded. She touched it, and discovered to her surprise that her hand was bloody. The wounds on the face were unlike other places. If scars were left behind, then that would disfigure one's appearance. Only now did Su Shi feel fear, with a trembling voice and her black pupils staring fixedly at Su Luo. You, she said you for quite a while, but could not continue and say a complete sentence. Also, it was no wonder that she was so shocked, as if she had seen a ghost. She had a rough idea of how strong Su Luo was through her duel with Su Qing from last time. Therefore, this time, she had already brought enough people to arrest Su Luo. But who would have known that Su Luo would have so many helpers, like Chinese chives after cropping off some? There were still more. Su Luo coldly watched her. What's wrong with you? Su Shi looked at Su Luo's appearance that was like a delicate summer flower, and recalled her own face that was full of blood. Momentarily, she was scared as well as furious. She hatefully cursed Su Luo. You bitch. Wicked witch. Why were you born into my family? Why don't you go and die? The more Su Shi cursed, the more energetic she became. She was itching to rush up and scuffle with Su Luo. But she was worried about the men dressed in black, therefore, her body remained unmoving, and she could only move her lips. Su Luo smiled coldly. Finished cursing? Su Shi glared furiously at Su Luo. More and more, she really couldn't see through to what Su Luo was really thinking. The her right now had seemed to change into a completely different person from before, just as if her soul had switched. Su Luo glanced at her indifferently, her deep eyes containing a mixture of cynicism and mockery. Since you have finished cursing, then now, can you finally tell me what really happened? Older brother was injured. He is nearly dead. Su Luo, it's all your fault he was harmed, all your fault. If it was not for you, older brother would have not ended up like this now. If it was not mentioned, then fine, but once this matter was mentioned, Su Shi would bawl. Su Jingyu? He was injured? I didn't do it. Su Luo's delicate and pretty face didn't have a trace of expression. Chapter 648. Dispute in a Love Triangle. 13. Yes, you didn't personally do it. But if it was not because of you, if you were not trying to snatch His Highness Prince Jean away from the Jade Lakes ferry, older brother would not have ended up in his current situation. Not waiting for Su Luo to ask, Sushi continued to talk nonstop. On the road back from school, older brother was ambushed. Those people beat older brother until he was black and blue, and even left behind some words. Sushi gnashed her teeth as she glared at Su Luo. Su Luo, you know what they said? They said, such lowly person. Don't even think about getting a treasure they cannot obtain. Otherwise, this is only the beginning. Sushi was cursing and crying at the same time. Aren't their words obvious enough? Su Luo, it's all you. It's all because you seduced His Highness Prince Jean and provoked the Jade Lakes fairy's anger, thus resulting in such a disaster. You are delivering our entire Su Manor into hell. Su Luo, you are simply too terrible. Faced with Sushi's condemnation, Su Luo was indifferent. Admittedly, the Jade Lakesley family wasn't good. Don't tell me the Su family was any better? Having lived in Su Manor for many years, Su Luo had personally experienced this. Could get the Jade Lakesley family to help deal with the Su family. Su Luo's heart didn't have enough time to even be happy, so why would she feel guilty? But on her face, she should at least assume some worry. A deep line of worry flashed through Su Luo's forehead. Then what about older brother? Is he gravely injured? Of course it's grave. He almost died. The imperial physician said he had no way to treat him. If you want to save older brother, you have to be able to invite an elite apothecary. The more Sushi spoke, the angrier she became. The angrier she got, the more she glared at Su Luo. How could the Su Manor be able to invite over an elite apothecary? Su Luo was very clear about the levels for an apothecary. From the bottom to top it was divided as elementary apothecary, intermediate apothecary, advanced apothecary, elite apothecary, master apothecary, grandmaster apothecary, until finally reaching the immortal status of divine apothecary level. But on this continent, apothecaries were extremely rare. Normally, even an elementary or intermediate apothecary's haughtiness had already soared to the skies. There were basically no advanced apothecaries, let alone the existence of an elite apothecary. However, Su Luo had a person she could choose in mind. That person just so happened to be an elite apothecary. However, wanting to invite him over was not an easy task with regards to Su Manor. Sushi didn't know that at this moment, Su Luo had thought of so much, and she merely glared at Su Luo. Quickly, you go tell His Highness Prince Jean that you will not be with him. Quickly go. Even though she had eaten a lot of losses in front of Su Luo, Sushi was still that arrogant, bossy and despotic, the fifth Miss Su. Su Luo smiled indifferently. If you want to go, then go. People come, see the visitor out. Su Luo, you this slut. Before she could finish her sentence, a black shadow flashed by, and another sharp claw that was faster than lightning scratched toward Sushi's face. A bitter yell burst out from Sushi's mouth, and blood started to fill the air, tumbling down drop by drop, seemingly extremely horrifying. Su Luo held the little divine dragon who had returned to take credit. She held him with one hand and used the other to reward him by stroking his head. Sushi had eaten such a loss. How could she be willing to give up? She was just about to order people to rush up. However, the people dressed in black that originally disappeared without a trace, once again appeared noiselessly. Each and every one of them carried a murderous aura with a ghostly appearance, their expressionless faces staring fixedly at Sushi. How ruthless were their methods. Sushi had seen it with her own eyes. Therefore, her feet that were moving forward were suddenly unable to move. For a moment, she didn't know what she ought to do. Get lost. Su Luo smiled lightly, casting a side glance at Sushi, whose entire face was full of indignation. Matters in the world were fickle. It had changed really fast. Chapter 649, Dispute in a Love Triangle 14. Half a year ago, this fifth Miss Su was still strutting around in front of Su Luo and showing off. If she really had wanted to poison her, even Su Luo might not have been able to avoid it back then. But now, she already could not do nothing to Su Luo. Not only this, now she couldn't even get close to Su Luo. In the end, Sushi could only hatefully glare at Su Luo, leaving behind some fierce words. Su Luo, just you wait, you will not have a good ending. Following Sushi's exit, that group of people also left grandiosely. The tranquility was again restored to Wisteria Courtyard. Miss Lu Luo looked at her family's miss with concern. This is merely the beginning. Su Luo's bleak, ancient well-like pair of eyes had a threatening cold air. Her lips were slightly bent at the corners. Lu Luo followed behind Su Luo, frowning while saying in criticism, Miss Say, why is the Jade Lake's fairy so shameless like this? Even though His Highness Prince Jean does not want her, she still uses various kinds of methods to coerce Mississippi. Where is there any of that rumored kind-hearted and gentle person who is a pure, ice beauty? Su Luo smiled, hiding the threat of chilliness in the depths of her eyes. Li Yaoyao never had that kind of kind-hearted, gentle temper. It was even more difficult, knowing where to start discussing how ice-like and pure she was. Through the opened window, Su Luo looked at the pink, delicate lotus outside while holding the little divine dragon. On that day in Sunset Mountain Range, just because Nangong Luyan got close to her, without the slightest hesitation, she immediately sent assassins to eliminate her. Su Luo. If you really want to discuss this, to describe her as narrow-minded, uses vicious means, takes arrogant and willful rash actions, would not be too excessive in describing her. Miss Lu Luo somewhat worriedly looked at Su Luo's back. After all, behind the Jade Lake's fairy back, stood the entire Jade Lakesley family. This kind of powerful background was not one the Miss was capable of contending against by herself. Moreover, on the Miss's side, the Master would definitely not support the Mississippi. Not only would he not support her, on the contrary, very likely he would deliberately make things difficult. Sigh, why was Mrs. Life so bitter and full of hardship like this? Lu Luo wanted to say something, but hesitantly gazed at her family's mistress. She was very anxious for Su Luo in her heart. As for the Jade Lakesley families, Su Luo mumbled to herself. If behind her also existed a powerful background, this matter would be simple. But unfortunately, in connection with her lot in life, she was not at all able to touch it nor understand clearly. Nangong Liuyun's schemes were so meticulous, as long as she acted in concert to him, then it would be fine. Chapter 650. Crafty Plots and Machinations 1. Very quickly, the person dressed in black returned with news of Apothecary Lung. Lung Yan, Apothecary Lung, one of the few elite apothecaries in Eastern Ling, just so happened to have met Su Luo through fate. It was a pitch-black night, so dark as to not be able to see your fingers in front of you. Su Luo's figure was like a leopard cat as she jumped out from the window and disappeared into the vast darkness of the night. Now within the capital it was quiet and noiseless. The night wind blew up the corner of her jacket and made it rustle. Su Luo's footsteps did not stop. On the roofs of the irregularly but charmingly arranged homes, she danced and jumped as she skimmed past. Very quickly, she arrived at tonight's destination. This was a courtyard in the center, and the most bustling part of the capital. Apothecary Lung had been busy all night in the refining pharmacy. He had just come out of the refining pharmacy and directly walked into his bedroom, pushing the door open as he entered. He then closed the door to inspect his surroundings. Suddenly, he raised his head to see a slight silhouette on the round chair made of red sandalwood. Apothecary Lung's heart was startled. There was actually someone that didn't inform him before directly entering his residence? Such great courage. Who? I order you to stand out. Apothecary Lung's voice held fury, with brows tightly wrinkled. Su Luo turned around, her eyes meeting with the startled ones of Apothecary Lung. Apothecary Lung, long time no see. You seem a lot younger. Su Luo cupped her hands in greeting, smiling happily as she looked at Apothecary Lung. When Apothecary Lung saw Su Luo, his expression was full of surprise. Miss Su? Why is it you? If it was another person that dared to trespass into Apothecary Lung's room, they would already have been dragged out and beaten to death with a stick. But Su Luo actually had this privilege. Su Luo was all smiles as she looked at him, the corner of her lips hooking up slightly. How is it unlikely to be me? Is it because Apothecary Lung had done something shameful, and doesn't dare to see me? Apothecary Lung, having heard what was said, immediately scowled and glared at her. Loathsome girl, what nonsense are you saying? How could this apothecary do something shameful? There wasn't enough time for me to even curry favor with you, loathsome girl. How could I dare to bully you? Apothecary Lung said secretly in his heart. Unexpectedly, Su Luo coldly snorted a few times. That's right, Apothecary Lung didn't openly bully me, but you let others bully me. Apothecary Lung felt that he was more wrong than Do Yi. This matter must be explained clearly. Impossible. Apothecary Lung felt that he was faced with supreme injustice. If I heard of who dares to bully you, this old man would have broken his legs already. How could I have helped him to bully you? But the results have already come out. How could Apothecary Lung still deny it here? Really makes a person feel deeply hurt. Su Luo looked towards the few distant stars and moon in the sky, then shook her head and feigned a sigh. He dragged over a circular bench and sat down firmly in front of Su Luo. Girl, come, tell me everything so I can understand thoroughly. When did this old man bully you? If you don't explain everything clearly, then don't expect to leave. These words from Su Luo had attracted Apothecary Lung's curiosity. He must wash off this stain until he was clean again. Now even if Su Luo had wanted to leave, Apothecary Lung would not have let her leave. Su Luo coldly snorted. Apothecary Lung, you must have successfully refined the rebirth of flesh pill, right? Mentioning this, Apothecary Lung immediately became as excited as a child. His eyes beamed with light. That's right, refined a few pills and also finished testing it. The results were excellent, ha. The recipe you gave me is indeed a treasure, ah. Su Luo once again coldly snorted. Then who did you, Apothecary Lung, find to test it on? Apothecary Lung thought for quite a while and still couldn't understand. He scratched his head and gloomily said, that pair of siblings was from what family? This I actually forgot. In any case, these people were not someone I found. It must have been the steward who went to the streets and randomly pulled a few people back, right? Why? There is a problem? Why? There is no why. Merely a few days ago this miss encountered a pair of siblings whose hands were chopped by me that somehow mysteriously had their hands grown back. This miss saw it and fell into a bad mood. Su Luo feigned anger and sent a glare at Apothecary Lung. One Do Yi. This is the main tragic female character of a play written during the Yuan dynasty. Basically, she was targeted by men who wanted to marry her and ended up framing her for murder. After her death, she was proven innocent. See wiki page here. Chapter 651. Crafty Plots and Machinations. 2. Apothecary Lung's old face immediately turned red, his face betraying an embarrassed expression. This piece of primeval pill recipe was originally bestowed as a gift from Su Girl to him. Now that he had refined the rebirth of flesh pill, he had used it to cure her enemy. Wasn't this a slap to Su Luo's face? As for mentioning this matter, it really was him not being conscientious. Apothecary Lung gave a dry cough. Cough, you, this girl's luck is pretty bad, moreover, your enemies seem to be widespread. The steward randomly brought 2 people over, and they turned out to be your enemy. That's right, they already said, Apothecary Lung and the Lu family's relationship is very close. You are the behind-the-scenes supporter of the Lu family, and they also mentioned you. They said if I dare to bully them, they will go complain to you. Hey, I'm really scared. Su Luo's tone was very lazy. Nonsense. Apothecary Lung suddenly stood up, full of indignation and rage. They were merely random people that my steward found, who knew who they were. They dared to use this old man's good reputation to brag everywhere. Simply hateful. This old man will immediately go cut off their arms. Su Luo gave him a shallow glance. There really is no close relationship? This old man doesn't even know the direction to the Lu residence. How could there be any close relationship? Simply absurd. Apothecary Lung slapped the table in extreme anger. They still dared to use this old man's name to bully you. They are tired of living. Su Luo rubbed her chin, giving a contemplating appearance. Apothecary Lung was really interested in Su Luo's primeval pill recipes. His only thoughts were to curry favor with Su Luo, coax her to be happy. Thinking about this matter, his heart felt extreme guilt towards Su Luo. He turned around and said, "How about this old man send people to chop off their hands?" There was only this way to remedy the situation. Su Luo dry coughed twice. If it was to go and chop off their hand. This really was something that a person with Apothecary Lung's temperament would do. But since destiny determined that those two siblings' hands would be restored, then it was really no good to go again and chop them off. Of course, if they were still unable to discern good from bad, Su Luo could chop off their hands at any time. For the time being, let them take care of those hands. Let them continue growing on their bodies. No need to cut off their hands, only, this matter made this Miss eat a little loss. Su Luo leaned back into the chair and unhurriedly said. The recliner rocked back and forth, giving off squeaking noises, but Su Luo merely closed her eyes in enjoyment. The Su Luo here was more relaxed and natural than at home. Apothecary Lung was able to understand with just this little hint. If there is something, Miss should just say it. If it is something this old man can do, this man will naturally do it at all costs. Apothecary Lung would only grant Su Luo whatever she wished with regards to others. He naturally was arrogantly aloof, with nose high up towards the sky. The corner of Su Luo's mouth was raised in a light, careless smile. She muttered to herself for quite a while before unhurriedly saying, I heard that Su Manor had just sent people to invite Apothecary Lung to treat the young master in Su Manor. Su Manor? Which Su Manor? Apothecary Lung's face was full of bewilderment. Apothecary Lung had spent his entire life immersed in refining drugs. With regards to the mortal worldly matters, he didn't understand. He also wasn't interested in understanding it. So what Lu Manor, Su Manor without exception he did not know. Now even if you were to ask him what direction the Imperial Palace's gate was, presumably, he also wouldn't know. Su Luo pointed to herself. This Mrs. Surname is Su. Only now did Apothecary Lung suddenly become enlightened. So it turned out to be your manor? This is not a problem, we will go right now. Other people will not do, but Su girl's face, this old man will nevertheless give it. You should feel assured, if your older brother is not dead, then this old man will think of a way. This was the first time Apothecary Lung was so enthusiastic about a disease. Because he was very clear, Su Luo would not owe people favors. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.